The following is a free-for-download audiobook from the website krishnapath.org. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Part 2, Chapter 13. Description of the descendants of Pṛthu Mahārāja. Text 1. Sutta Goswami, continuing to speak to all the rishis headed by Shaunaka, said, after hearing Maitreya Rishi describe Pṛthu Mahārāja's ascent to Lord Vishnu's abode, Vidura became very enlightened in devotional emotion, and he inquired from Maitreya as follows. Purport. As evidenced in the topics between Vidura and Maitreya, the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the devotees are so fascinating that neither the devotee who is describing them nor the devotee who is hearing is at all fatigued by the inquiries and answers. Transcendental subject matter is so nice that no one becomes tired of hearing or speaking. Others who are not devotees may think, quote, how can people devote so much time simply to talks of God, end quote. But devotees are never satisfied or satiated in hearing and speaking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead or about his devotees. The more they hear and talk, the more they become enthusiastic to hear. The chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is simply a repetition of three words, Hare, Krishna, and Rama. But still, devotees can go on chanting this Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours a day without feeling fatigued. Text 2. Vidura inquired from Maitreya, O greatly advanced devotee, who were the Prachetas? To which family do they belong? Whose sons were they? And where did they perform the great sacrifices? Purport. The great sage Narada's singing in the previous chapter of three verses in the sacrificial arena of the Prachetas gave another impetus for Vidura to ask further questions. Text 3. Vidura continued, I know that the great sage Narada is the greatest of all devotees. He has compiled the Pancharatrika procedure of devotional service and has directly met the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. There are two different ways of approaching the Supreme Lord. One is called Bhagavat Marga, or the way of Srimad-Bhagavatam, and the other is called Pancharatrika Vidhi. Pancharatrika Vidhi is the method of temple worship, and Bhagavat Vidhi is the system of 9 processes which begin with hearing and chanting. The Krishna consciousness movement accepts both processes simultaneously, and thus enables one to make steady progress on the path of realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Pancharatrika system was first introduced by the great sage Narada, as referred to here by Vidura. Text 4. While all the Prachetas were executing religious rituals and sacrificial ceremonies and thus worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his satisfaction, the great sage Narada described the transcendental qualities of Pṛthu Mahārāja. Purport. Narada Muni is always glorifying the pastimes of the Lord. In this verse, we see that he not only glorifies the Lord, but he also likes to glorify the devotees of the Lord. The great sage Narada Muni's mission is to broadcast the devotional service of the Lord. For this purpose, he has compiled the Narada Pancharatra, a directory of devotional service, so that devotees can always take information about how to execute devotional service and thus engage 24 hours a day in performing sacrifices for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has created 4 orders of whole social life, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. In the Narada Pancharatra, it is clearly described how each of the social orders can please the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, 1845, it is stated, Sve sve karmani abhidartha samsiddhim labhate nara. By executing one's prescribed duties, one can please the Supreme Lord. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is also stated, Sanusvitasya dharmasya samsiddhi haritoshanam. The perfection of duty is to see that by discharging one's specific duties, one satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srimad-Bhagavatam 1:2-13. When the Prachetas were performing sacrifices according to this direction, Narada Muni was satisfied to see these activities, and he also wanted to glorify Dhruva Maharaj in that sacrificial arena. Text 5. My dear Brahmana, how did Narada Muni glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and what pastimes were described in that meeting? I am very eager to hear of them. Kindly explain fully about that glorification of the Lord. Purport. Srimad-Bhagavatam is a record of Bhagavat Katha, topics about the pastimes of the Lord. What Vidura was anxious to hear from Maitreya, we can also hear 5,000 years later, provided we are eager. Text 60. The great sage Maitreya replied, My dear Vidura, when Maharaj Dhruva departed for the forest, his son, Utkala, did not desire to accept the opulent throne of his father, which was meant for the ruler of all the lands of this planet. Text 7. From his very birth, Utkala was fully satisfied and unattached to the world. He was equipoised, for he could see everything resting in the Supersoul and the Supersoul present in everyone's heart. Purport. The symptoms and characteristics of Utkala, the son of Maharaj Dhruva, are those of a Mahabhagavat. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 6.30, Yomam pasyati sarvatra sarvam cha mayi pasyati. A highly advanced devotee sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead everywhere, and he also sees everything resting in the Supreme. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.4, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina. Lord Krishna is spread all over the universe in his impersonal feature. Everything is resting on him, but that does not mean that everything is he himself. A highly advanced Mahabhagavat devotee sees in this spirit. He sees the same Supersoul, Paramatma, existing within everyone's heart, regardless of discrimination, based on the different material forms of the living entities. He sees everyone as part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Mahabhagavat who experiences the Supreme Godhead's presence everywhere is never missing from the sight of the Supreme Lord, nor is the Supreme Lord ever lost from his sight. This is only possible when one is advanced in love of Godhead. Text 8 and 9. By expansion of his knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, he had already attained liberation from the bondage of the body. This is known as nirvana. He was situated in transcendental bliss, and he continued always in that blissful existence which expanded more and more. This was possible for him by continual practice of bhakti yoga, which is compared with fire because it burns away all dirty material things. He was always situated in his constitutional position of self-realization, and he could not see anything else but the Supreme Lord and himself engaged in discharging devotional service. Purport. These two verses explain the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prashanatma Nashochati Nakankshati Samasarveshu Bhuteshu Madbhaktim Labate Param. Quote, one who is transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equal disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he achieves pure devotional service unto me. Bhagavad Gita 18:54. This is also explained by Lord Chaitanya in his Shikshastika in the beginning of the first verse. Chaito darpanam arjanam bhav mahadabhagnidabhapanam sayakaravacharanam kavataranam vidyavaru jivanam. The Bhakti Yoga system is the topmost yoga system, and in this system, the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is the foremost performance of devotional service. By chanting the holy name, one can attain the perfection of nirvana, or liberation from material existence, and so increase one's blissful life of spiritual existence as described by Lord Chaitanya. Anandam buddhi vardhanam. When one is situated in that position, he no longer has any interest in material opulence or even a royal throne and sovereignty over the whole planet. This situation is called viraktir anyatra shriyat, and it is the result of devotional service. The more one makes advancement in devotional service, the more one becomes detached from material opulence and material activity. This is the spiritual nature, full of bliss. This is also described in Bhagavad Gita 5.29. Param dvishtva vartate. One ceases to take part in material enjoyment upon tasting superior blissful life in spiritual existence. By advancement in spiritual knowledge, which is considered to be like a blazing fire, all material desires are burned to ashes. The perfection of mystic yoga is possible when one is continuously in connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by discharging devotional service. A devotee is always thinking of the Supreme Person at every step of his life. Every conditioned soul is full of the reactions of his past life, but all dirty things are immediately burnt to ashes if one simply executes devotional service. This is described in the Vinarda Pancharatra, Sarvapadi Vimirmuktam Tad Paratvena Nirmalam. Text 10. Utkala appeared to the less intelligent persons on the road to be foolish, blind, dumb, deaf, and mad, although actually he was not so. He remained like fire covered with ashes, without blazing flames. Purport. In order to avoid contradiction, botheration, and unfavorable situations created by materialistic persons, a great saintly person like Jad Bharat or Utkala remains silent. The less intelligent consider such saintly persons to be mad, deaf, or dumb. Factually, an advanced devotee avoids speaking with persons who are not in devotional life, but to those who are in devotional life, he speaks in friendship, and he speaks to the innocent for their enlightenment. For all practical purposes, the whole world is full of non-devotees, and so one kind of very advanced devotee is called Bhajananandi. Those who are Goshtianandi, however, preach to increase the number of devotees. But even such preachers also avoid opposing elements who are unfavorably disposed toward spiritual life. Text 11. For this reason, the ministers and all the elderly members of the family thought Utkala to be without intelligence and, in fact, mad. Thus, his younger brother named Vatsara, who was the son of Brahmi and who was junior to Utkala, was elevated to the royal throne, and he became king of the world. Purport. It appears that although there was monarchy, it was not at all an autocracy. There were senior family members and ministers who could make changes and elect the proper person to the throne, although the throne could be occupied only by the royal family. In modern days also, wherever there is monarchy, sometimes the ministers and elderly members of the family select one member of the royal family to occupy the throne in preference to another. Text 12. King Vatsara had a very dear wife whose name was Shvarviti, and she gave birth to 6 sons, namely Pushparna, Tigmaketu, Isha, Urja, Vasu, and Jai. Purport. Vatsara's wife is mentioned here as Ishta, which means worshipable. In other words, it appears that Vatsara's wife had all good qualities. For example, she was always very faithful and obedient and affectionate to her husband. She had all good qualities for managing household affairs. If both the husband and wife are endowed with good qualities and live peacefully, then nice children take birth, and thus the whole family is happy and prosperous. Text 13. Pushparna had 2 wives, namely Prabha and Dosha. Prabha had 3 sons, namely Prata, Madhyandinam, and Sayam. Text 14. Dosa had 3 sons, Pradosha, Nishita, and Vyushta. Vyushta's wife was named Pushkarini, and she gave birth to a very powerful son named Sarvateja. Text 15 and 16. Sarvateja's wife, Akuti, gave birth to a son named Chakshush, who became the 6th Manu at the end of the Manu millennium. Nadvala, the wife of Chakshush Manu, gave birth to the following faultless sons: Puru, Kutsha, Trita, Dyuma, Satyavan, Rita, Vrata, Agnishtoma, Atiratra, Padyumna, Shibi, and Ulmuka. Text 17. Of the 12 sons, Ulmuka begot 6 sons and his wife Pushkarini. They were all very good sons, and their names were Anga, Sumana, Kyati, Kratu, Angira, and Gaya. Text 18. The wife of Anga, Shunita, gave birth to a son named Vena, who was very crooked. The saintly King Anga was very disappointed with his bad character, and he left home and kingdom and went out to the forest. Text 19 and 20. My dear Vidura, when great sages curse, their words are as invincible as a thunderbolt. Thus, when they cursed King Vena out of anger, he died. After his death, since there was no king, all the rogues and thieves flourished. The kingdom became unregulated, and all the citizens suffered greatly. On seeing this, the great sages took the right hand of Vena as a churning rod, and as a result of their churning, Lord Vishnu, in his partial representation, advented as King Prithu, the original emperor of the world. Purport. Monarchy is better than democracy because if the monarchy is very strong and the regular principles within the kingdom are upheld very nicely. Even 100 years ago, in the state of Kashmir in India, the king was so strong that if a thief were arrested in his kingdom, he was brought before the king would immediately chop off the hands of the thief. As a result of this severe punishment, there were practically no theft cases within the kingdom. Even if someone left something on the street, no one would touch it. The rule was that the things could be taken away only by the proprietor and that no one else could touch them. In the so-called democracy, whenever there is a theft case, the police come and take note of the case, but generally the thief is never caught nor is any punishment offered to him. As a result of incapable government at the present moment, thieves, rogues, and cheaters are very prominent all over the world. Text 21. Vidura inquired from the sage Maitreya, My dear Brahmana, King Anga was very gentle. He had high character and was a saintly personality and a lover of Brahminical culture. How is it that such a great soul got a bad son like Vena, because of whom he became indifferent to his kingdom and left it? Purport. In family life, a man is supposed to live happily with his father, mother, wife, and children, but sometimes, under certain conditions, a father, mother, child, or wife becomes an enemy. It is said by Chanakya Pandit that a father is an enemy when he is too much in debt. A mother is an enemy if she marries for a second time. A wife is an enemy if she is very beautiful. And a son is an enemy when he is a foolish rascal. In this way, when a family member becomes an enemy, it is very difficult to live in family life or remain a householder. Generally, such situations occur in the material world. Therefore, according to Vedic culture, one has to take leave of his family members just after his 50th year so that the balance of his life may be completely devoted in search of Krishna consciousness. Text 22. Vidura also inquired, how is it that the great sages who were completely conversant with religious principles decided to curse King Vena, who himself carried the rod of punishment and thus awarded him the greatest punishment, Brahmashapa? Purport. It is understood that the king is able to give punishment to everyone, but in this case it appears that the great sages punished him. The king must have done something very serious, otherwise how could the great sages, who were supposed to be the greatest and most tolerant, still punish him in spite of their elevated religious consciousness? It appears also that the king was not independent of the Brahminical culture. Above the king there was the control of the Brahmanas, and if indeed the Brahmanas would dethrone a king or would kill him, not with any weapon, but with the mantra of a Brahmashapa, the Brahmanas were so powerful that simply by their cursing one would immediately die. Text 23. It is the duty of all citizens in a state never to insult the king, even though he sometimes appears to have done something very sinful. Because of his prowess, the king is always more influential than all other ruling chiefs. Purport. According to Vedic civilization, the king is supposed to be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is called Narayan, indicating that Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appears in human society as the king. It is etiquette that neither a Brahmana nor a Kshatriya king is ever insulted by the citizens. Even though a king appears to be sinful, the citizens should not insult him. But in the case of Vena, it appears that he was cursed by the Naradevatas. Therefore, it was concluded that his sinful activities were very grievous. Text 24. Vidura requested Maitreya, "My dear Brahmana, you are well conversant with all subjects, both past and future. Therefore, I wish to hear from you all the activities of King Vena. I am your faithful devotee, so please explain this." Purport. Vidura accepted Maitreya as his spiritual master. A disciple always inquires from the spiritual master, and the spiritual master answers the question, provided the disciple is very gentle and devoted. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that by the mercy of the spiritual master, one is benedicted with the mercy of the Supreme Lord. The spiritual master is not inclined to disclose all the secrets of transcendental science, unless the disciple is very submissive and devoted. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the process of receiving knowledge from the spiritual master entails submission, inquiry, and service. Text 25. Sage Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, once the great king Anga arranged to perform a great sacrifice known as Ashvamedha. All the expert brahmanas knew how to invite the demigods, but in spite of their efforts, no demigods participated or appeared in that sacrifice." Purport. A Vedic sacrifice is not an ordinary performance. The demigods used to participate in such sacrifices, and the animals sacrificed in such performances were reincarnated with new life. In this age of Kali, there are no powerful brahmanas who can invite the demigods or give renewed life to animals. Formerly, the brahmanas, well conversant in Vedic mantras, could show the potency of the mantras, but in this age, because there are no such brahmanas, all such sacrifices are forbidden. The sacrifice in which horses were offered was called Ashvamedha. Sometimes cows were sacrificed, Govalamba, not for eating purposes, but to give them new life in order to show the potency of the mantra. In this age, therefore, the only practical yoga is Sankirtan yoga, or the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours a day. Text 26. The priests engaged in the sacrifice then informed King Anga, "O king, we are properly offering the clarified butter in the sacrifice, but despite all our efforts, the demigods do not accept it." Text 27. "O king, we know that the paraphernalia to perform the sacrifice is well collected by you with great faith and care and is not polluted. Our chanting of the Vedic hymns also is not deficient in any way because all the brahmanas and priests present here are expert and are executing the performances properly." Purport. It is the practice of the brahmanas conversant with the science to pronounce a Vedic mantra within the right accent. The combination of the mantra and Sanskrit words must be chanted with the right pronunciation, otherwise it will not be successful. In this age, the brahmanas are neither well versed in the Sanskrit language nor very pure in practical life. But by the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, one can attain the highest benefit of sacrificial performances. Even if the Hare Krishna mantra is not chanted properly, still it has so much potency that the chanter gains the effect. Text 28. Dear King, we do not find any reason that the demigods should feel insulted or neglected in any way, but still the demigods who are witnesses for the sacrifice do not accept their shares. We do not know why it is so. Purport. As indicated herein, that if there is negligence on the part of the priest, the demigods do not accept their share in sacrifices. Similarly, in devotional service, there are offenses known as seva aparad. Those who are engaged in worshiping the deity, Radha and Krishna, in the temple should avoid such offenses in service. The offenses in service are described in Nectar of Devotion. If we simply make a show of offering services to the deity but do not care for the seva aparad, certainly Radha and Krishna deity will not accept offerings from such non-devotees. Devotees engaged in temple worship should not, therefore, manufacture their own methods, but should strictly follow the regulative principles of cleanliness. Then offerings will be accepted. Text 29. Maitreya explained to King Anga, after hearing the statements of the priests, he was greatly aggrieved. At that time he took permission from the priests to break his silence and inquired from all the priests who were present in the sacrificial arena. Text 30. King Anga addressed the priestly order. My dear priest, kindly tell me what offense I have committed. Although invited, the demigods are neither taking part in the sacrifice nor accepting their shares. Text 31. The head priests said, O king, in this life we do not find any sinful activity even within your mind, so you are not in the least offensive. But we can see that in your previous life you performed sinful activities due to which, in spite of your having all qualifications, you have no son. Purport. The purpose of marrying is to beget a son, because a son is necessary to deliver his father and forefathers from any hellish condition of life which there may be. Chanakya Pandit therefore says, Mutrahinam grihan shunyam. Without a son, married life is simply abominable. King Anga was a very pious king in this life, but because of his previous sinful activity, he could not get a son. It is concluded, therefore, that if a person does not get a son, it is due to his past sinful life. Text 32. O king, we wish all good fortune for you. You have no son, but if you pray at once to the Supreme Lord and ask for a son, and if you execute the sacrifice for that purpose, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will fulfill your desire. Text 33. When Hari, the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices, is invited to fulfill your desire for a son, all the demigods will come with him and take their shares in the sacrifice. Purport. Whenever a sacrifice is performed, it is meant for satisfying Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of the fruits of all sacrifices. And when Lord Vishnu agrees to come to the sacrificial arena, all the demigods naturally follow their master, and their shares are offered in such sacrifices. The conclusion is that the sacrifices are meant for Lord Vishnu, not for the demigods. Text 34. The performer of the sacrifices under karmakanda activities achieves the fulfillment of the desire for which he worships the Lord. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he awards benediction to the worshipper according to his desire. The Supreme Personality of Godhead gives all living entities conditioned within this material world full freedom to act in their own way. But to his devotee, he says that instead of working in that way, it is better to surrender unto him, for he will take charge of the devotee. That is the difference between a devotee and a fruitive actor. The fruitive actor enjoys only the fruits of his own activities, but a devotee, being under the guidance of the Supreme Lord, simply advances in devotional service to achieve the ultimate goal of life, to go back home, back to Godhead. The significant word using this verse is kaman, which means sense gratificatory desires. A devotee is devoid of all kaman. He is anya bilashita sunya. A devotee is always devoid of all desires for sense gratification. His only aim is to satisfy or gratify the senses of the Lord. That is the difference between a karmi and a devotee. Text 35. Thus, for the sake of a son for King Anga, they decided to offer oblations to Lord Vishnu, who is situated in the hearts of all living entities. Purport. According to sacrificial rituals, animals are sometimes sacrificed in the yaga arena. Such animals are sacrificed not to kill them, but to give them new life. Such action was an experiment to observe whether the Vedic mantras were being properly pronounced. Sometimes small animals are killed in a medical laboratory to investigate therapeutic effect. In a medicinal clinic, the animals are not revived, but in the Jaga arena, when animals were sacrificed, they were again given life by the potency of Vedic mantras. The word Shipi Vishtaya appears in this verse. Shipi means the flames of sacrifice. In the sacrificial fire, if the oblations are offered into the flames, then Lord Vishnu is situated there in the form of the flames. Therefore, Lord Vishnu is known as Shipi Vishta. Text 36. As soon as the oblation was offered in the fire, a person appeared from the fire altar wearing a golden garland and white dress. He was carrying a golden pot filled with rice boiled in milk. Text 37. The king was very liberal, and after taking permission from the priests, he took the preparation in his joined palms, and after smelling it, he offered a portion to his wife. Purport. The word Udaradi is significant in this connection. The wife of the king, Sunita, was not fit to accept this benediction, yet the king was so liberal that without hesitation he offered to his wife the boiled rice and milk prasad received from the Jagapurusha. Of course, everything is designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As will be explained in later verses, this incident was not very favorable for the king. Since the king was very liberal, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in order to increase his detachment from this material world, willed that a cruel son be born of the queen so that the king would have to leave home. As stated above, Lord Vishnu fulfills the desires of the karmis as they desire, but the Lord fulfills the desire of a devotee in a different way so that the devotee may gradually come to him. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Dadami buddhi yogam tame enamam upayantite. The Lord gives the devotee the opportunity to make further progress so that he may come back home, back to Godhead. Text 38. Although the queen had no son, after eating that food, which had the power to produce a male child, she became pregnant from her husband, and in due course of time she gave birth to a son. Purport. Among the 10 kinds of purificatory processes, one is Pum Shavanam, in which the wife is offered some prasad, the remnants of foodstuff offered to Lord Vishnu, so that after sexual intercourse with her husband, she may conceive a child. Text 39. That boy was born partially in the dynasty of irreligion. His grandfather was death personified, and as the boy grew up as his follower, he became a greatly irreligious person. Purport. The child's mother, Shinita, was the daughter of death personified. Generally, the daughter receives the qualifications of her father, and the son acquires those of the mother. So according to the axiomatic truth that things equal to the same thing are equal to one another, the child born of King Anga became the follower of his maternal grandfather. According to Shmiti Shastra, a child generally follows the principles of his maternal uncle's house. Naranam Matula Karma means that a child generally follows the qualities of his maternal family. If the maternal family is very corrupt or sinful, the child, even though born of a good father, becomes a victim of the maternal family. According to Vedic civilization, therefore, before the marriage takes place, an account is taken of both the boys' and girls' families. If according to astrological calculation the combination is perfect, then marriage takes place. Sometimes, however, there is a mistake, and family life becomes frustrating. It appears that King Anga did not get a very good wife in Shinita because she was the daughter of death personified. Sometimes the Lord arranges an unfortunate wife for his devotee so that gradually, due to family circumstances, the devotee becomes detached from his wife and home and makes progress in devotional life. It appears that by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, King Anga, although a pious devotee, got an unfortunate wife like Shinita, and later on a bad child like Vena. But the result was that he got complete freedom from the entanglement of family life and left home to go back to Godhead. Text 40. After fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer, and as soon as he came, all the people would cry, "Here comes cruel Vena! Here comes cruel Vena!" Purport. Kshatriyas are allowed to hunt in the forest for the purpose of learning the killing art, not to kill animals for eating, but for any other purpose. The Kshatriya kings were sometimes expected to cut off the head of a culprit in the state. For this reason, the Kshatriyas were allowed to hunt in the forest. Because this son of King Anga, Vena, was born of a bad mother, he was very cruel, and used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill the animals. All the neighboring inhabitants would be frightened by this presence, and they would call, "Here comes Vena! Here comes Vena!" So from the beginning of his life, he was fearful to the citizens. Text 41. The boy was so cruel that while playing with young boys of his age, he would kill them very mercilessly, as if they were animals meant for slaughter. Text 42. After seeing the cruel and merciless behavior of his son, Vena, King Anga punished him in different ways to reform him, but he was unable to bring him to the path of gentleness. He thus became greatly aggrieved. Text 43. The king thought to himself, "Persons who have no son are certainly fortunate. They must have worshipped the Lord in their previous lives so that they would not have to suffer the unbearable unhappiness caused by a bad son." Text 44. A sinful son causes a person's reputation to vanish. His irreligious activities at home cause irreligion and quarrel among everyone, and this creates only endless anxiety. Purport. It is said that a married couple must have a son, otherwise their family life is void. But a son born without good qualities is as good as a blind eye. A blind eye has no use for seeing, but it is simply unbearably painful. The king therefore thought himself very unfortunate to have such a bad son. Text 45. Who, if he is considerate and intelligent, would desire such a worthless son? Such a son is nothing but a bondage of illusion for the living entity, and he makes one's home miserable. Text 46. Then the king thought, a bad son is better than a good son because a good son creates an attachment for home, whereas a bad son does not. A bad son creates a hellish home from which an intelligent man naturally becomes very, very easily detached. Purport. The king began to think in terms of attachment and detachment from one's material home. According to Pṛthu Mahārāja, the material home is compared to a blind well. If a man falls down into a blind well, it is very difficult to get out of it and begin life again. Pṛthu Mahārāja has advised that one should give up this blind well of home life as soon as possible and go to the forest and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Vedic civilization, this giving up of home with vanaprastha and sannyas is compulsory. But people are so attached to their homes that even up to the point of death, they do not like to retire from home life. King Anga, therefore, thinking in terms of detachment, accepted his bad son as a good impetus for detachment from home life. He therefore considered his bad son his friend, since he was helping him to become detached from his home. Ultimately, one has to learn how to detach oneself from attachment to material life. Otherwise, therefore, if a bad son, by his bad behavior, helps a householder to go away from home, it is a boon. Text 47. Thinking like that, King Anga could not sleep at night. He became completely indifferent to household life. Once, therefore, in the dead of night, he got up from bed and left Vena's mother, his wife, who was sleeping deeply. He gave up all attraction for his greatly opulent kingdom, and, unseen by anyone, he very silently gave up his home and opulence and proceeded toward the forest. Purport. In this verse, the word Mahodayodayat indicates that by the blessings of a great soul, one becomes materially opulent. But when one gives up attachment to material wealth, that should be considered even a greater blessing from the great souls. It was not a very easy task for the king to give up his opulent kingdom and young faithful wife, but it was certainly a great blessing from the Supreme Personality of Godhead that he could give up the attachment and go to the forest without being seen by anyone. There are many instances of great souls leaving home in this way in the dead of night, giving up attachment for home, wife, and money. Text 48. When it was understood that the king had indifferently left home, all the citizens, priests, ministers, friends, and people in general were greatly aggrieved. They began to search for him all over the world, just as a less experienced mystic searches out the supersoul within himself. Purport. The example of searching for the supersoul within the heart by the less intelligent mystics is very instructive. The absolute truth is understood in three different features, namely impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such Kuyogina, or less intelligent mystics, can by mental speculation reach the point of the impersonal Brahman, but they cannot find the supersoul who is sitting within each living entity. When the king left, it was certain that he was staying somewhere else, but because they did not know how to find them, they were frustrated like the less intelligent mystics. Text 49. When the citizens could not find any trace of the king after searching for him everywhere, they were very disappointed, and they returned to the city, where all the great sages of the country assembled because of the king's absence. With tears in their eyes, the citizens offered respectful obeisances and informed them in full detail that they were unable to find the king anywhere. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 4th Canto, 13th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Description of the Descendants of Pṛthu Mahārāja. The following is a free-for-download audiobook from the website krishnapath.org. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Part 2, Chapter 14. The Story of King Vena. Text 1. The great sage Maitreya continued, O great hero Vidura, the great sages, headed by Bhrigu, were always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. When they saw that in the absence of King Anga there was no one to protect the interests of the people, they understood that without a ruler the people would become independent and non-regulated. Purport. In this verse, the significant word is Kshema Darshina, which refers to those who are always looking after the welfare of the people in general. However, all the great sages, headed by Bhrigu, were always thinking of how to elevate all the people of the universe to the spiritual platform. Indeed, they advised the kings of every planet to rule the people with that ultimate goal of life in mind. The great sages used to advise the head of the state, or the king, and he used to rule the populace in accordance with their instruction. After the disappearance of King Anga, there was no one to follow the instructions of the great sages. Consequently, all the citizens became unruly, so much so that they could be compared to animals. As described in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, human society must be divided into 4 orders according to quality and work. In every society there must be an intelligent class, administrative class, productive class, and worker class. In modern democracy, these scientific divisions are turned topsy-turvy, and by vote, Shudras, or workers, are chosen for administrative posts. Having no knowledge of the ultimate goal of life, such persons whimsically enact laws without knowledge of life's purpose. The result is that no one is happy. Text 2. The great sages then called for the Queen Mother, Shunita. With her permission, they installed Vena on the throne as master of the world. All the ministers, however, disagreed with this. Text 3. It was already known that Vena was very severe and cruel. Therefore, as soon as all the thieves and rogues in the state heard of his ascendance to the royal throne, they became very much afraid of him. Indeed, they hid themselves here and there, as rats hide themselves from snakes. Purport. When the government is very weak, rogues and thieves flourish. Similarly, when the government is very strong, all the thieves and rogues disappear and hide themselves. Of course, Vena was not a very good king, but he was known to be cruel and severe. Thus, the state at least became free from thieves and rogues. Text 4. When the king ascended to the throne, he became all-powerful with 8 kinds of opulences. Consequently, he became too proud. By virtue of his false prestige, he considered himself to be greater than anyone. Thus, he began to insult great personalities. Purport. In this verse, the word astavibhutibi, meaning by 8 opulences, is very important. The king is supposed to possess 8 kinds of opulence. By dint of mystic yoga practices, kings generally acquired these 8 kinds of opulences. These kings were called Rajarshis, kings who were also great sages. By practicing mystic yoga, a Rajarshi could become smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest, could get whatever he desired. A Rajarshi could also create a kingdom, bring everyone under his control, and rule them. These were some of the opulences of a king. King Vena, however, was not practiced in yoga, and he became very proud of his royal position nonetheless. Because he was not very considerate, he began to misuse his power and insult great personalities. Text 5. When he became overly blind due to his opulences, King Vena mounted a chariot and, like an uncontrolled elephant, began to travel through the kingdom, causing the sky and earth to tremble wherever he went. Text 6. All the twice-born brahmanas were forbidden henceforward to perform any sacrifice, and they were also forbidden to give charity or offered clarified butter. Thus, King Vena sounded kettle drums throughout the countryside. In other words, he stopped all kinds of religious rituals. Purport. What was committed by King Vena many years ago is at present being carried out by atheistic governments all over the world. The world situation is so tense that at any moment governments may issue declarations to stop religious rituals. Eventually, the world situation will become so degraded that it will be impossible for pious men to live on this planet. Therefore, sane people should execute Krishna consciousness very seriously so that they can go back home, back to Godhead, without having to further suffer the miserable conditions predominant in this universe. Text 7. Therefore, all the great sages assembled together and, after observing cruel Vena's atrocities, concluded that a great danger and catastrophe was approaching the people of the world. Thus, out of compassion, they began to talk amongst themselves, for they themselves were the sacrificial performers. Purport. Before King Vena was enthroned, all the great sages were very much anxious to see to the welfare of society. When they saw that King Vena was most irresponsible, cruel, and atrocious, they again began to think of the welfare of the people. It should be understood that sages, saintly persons, and devotees are not unconcerned with the people's welfare. Ordinary karmis are busy acquiring money for sense gratification, and ordinary jnanis are socially aloof when they speculate on liberation, but actual devotees and saintly persons are always anxious to see how the people can be made happy both materially and spiritually. Therefore, the great sages began to consult one another on how to get out of the dangerous atmosphere created by King Vena. Text 8. When the great sages consulted one another, they saw that the people were in a dangerous position from both directions. When a fire blazes on both ends of a log, the ants in the middle are in a very dangerous situation. Similarly, at that time, the people in general were in a dangerous position due to an irresponsible king on one side and thieves and rogues on the other. Text 9. Thinking to save the state from irregularity, the sages began to consider that it was due to a political crisis that they made King Vena king, although he was not qualified. But alas, now the people were being disturbed by the king himself. Under such circumstances, how could the people be happy? Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 18.5, it is stated that even in the renounced order, one should not give up sacrifice, charity, and penance. The brahmacharis must perform sacrifices, the grihastas must give in charity, and those in the renounced order of life, the banaprasas and sannyasis, must practice penances and austerities. These are the procedures by which everyone can be elevated to the spiritual platform. When the sages and saintly persons saw that King Vena had stopped all these functions, they became concerned about the people's progress. Saintly people preach God consciousness or Krishna consciousness because they are anxious to save the general populace from the dangers of animalistic life. There must be a good government to see that the citizens are actually executing their religious rituals, and thieves and rogues must be curbed. When this is done, the people can advance peacefully in spiritual consciousness and make their lives successful. Text 10. The sages began to think within themselves. Because he was born in the womb of Shanita, King Vena is by nature very mischievous. Supporting this mischievous king is exactly like maintaining a snake with milk. Now he has become a source of all difficulties. Purport. Saintly persons are generally aloof from social activities and the materialistic way of life. King Vena was supported by the saintly persons just to protect the citizens from the hands of rogues and thieves, but after his ascendance to the throne, he became a source of trouble to the sages. Saintly people are especially interested in performing sacrifices and austerities for the advancement of spiritual life, but Vena, instead of being obliged because of the saints' mercy, turned out to be their enemy because he prohibited them from executing their ordinary duties. A serpent who is maintained with milk and bananas simply stores poison in his teeth and awaits the day to bite his master. Text 11. We appointed this Vena king of the state in order to give protection to the citizens, but now he has become the enemy of the citizens. Despite all these discrepancies, we should at once try to pacify him. By doing so, we may not be touched by the sinful results caused by him. Purport. The saintly sages elected King Vena to become king, but he proved to be mischievous. Therefore, the sages were very much afraid of incurring sinful reaction. The law of karma even prohibits a person to associate with a mischievous individual. By electing Vena to the throne, the saintly sages certainly associated with him. Ultimately, King Vena became so mischievous that the saintly sages actually became afraid of becoming contaminated by his activities. Thus, before taking any action against him, the sages tried to pacify and correct him so that he might turn from his mischief. Text 12. The saintly sages continued thinking, "Of course, we are completely aware of his mischievous nature. Nevertheless, we enthroned Vena. If we cannot persuade King Vena to accept our advice, he will be condemned by the public, and we will join him. Thus, by our prowess, we shall burn him to ashes." Purport. Saintly persons are not interested in political matters, yet they are always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. Consequently, they sometimes have to come down to the political field and take steps to correct the misguided government or royalty. However, in Kali Yuga, saintly persons are not as powerful as they previously were. They used to be able to burn any sinful man to ashes by virtue of their spiritual prowess. Now, saintly persons have no such power due to the influence of the age of Kali. Indeed, the Brahmanas do not even have the power to perform sacrifices in which animals are put into a fire to attain a new life. Under these circumstances, instead of actively taking part in politics, saintly persons should engage in chanting the Maha Mantra Hare Krishna. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya, simply by chanting this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the general populace can derive all benefits without political implications. Text 13. The great sages, having thus decided, approached King Vena. Concealing their real anger, they pacified him with sweet words, and then spoke as follows. Text 14. The great sages said, "Dear King, we have come to give you good advice. Kindly hear us with great attention. By doing so, your duration of life, your opulence, strength, and reputation will increase." Purport. According to Vedic civilization, in a monarchy, the king is advised by saintly persons and sages. By taking their advice, he can become the greatest executive power, and everyone in his kingdom will be happy, peaceful, and prosperous. The great kings were very responsible in taking the instructions given by great saintly personalities. The kings used to accept the instructions given by great sages like Parashara, Vyasadeva, Narada, Devala, Asita, etc. In other words, they would first accept the authority of saintly persons and then execute their monarchical power. Unfortunately, in the present age of Kali, the head of government does not follow the instructions given by the saintly persons. Therefore, neither the citizens nor the men of government are very happy. Their duration of life is shortened, and almost everyone is wretched and bereft of bodily strength and spiritual power. If citizens want to be happy and prosperous in this democratic age, they should not elect rascals and fools who have no respect for saintly persons. Text 15. Those who live according to religious principles and who follow them by words, body, mind, and intelligence are elevated to the heavenly kingdom, which is devoid of all miseries. Being thus rid of the material influence, they achieve unlimited happiness in life. Purport. The saintly sages herein instruct that the king or head of government should set an example by living a religious life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, religion means worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should not simply make a show of religious life, but one should perform devotional service perfectly with words, mind, body, and good intelligence. By doing so, not only will the king or government head rid himself of the contamination of the material modes of nature, but the general public will also, and they will also all become gradually elevated to the kingdom of God and go back home, back to Godhead. The instructions given herein serve as a summary of how the head of government should execute his ruling power and thus attain happiness not only in this life but also in the life after death. Text 16. The sages continued, O great hero, for this reason you should not be the cause of spoiling the spiritual life of the general populace. If their spiritual life is spoiled because of your activities, you will certainly fall down from your royal and opulent position. Purport. Formerly, in practically all parts of the world, there were monarchies, but gradually as monarchy declined from the ideal life of religion to the godless life of sense gratification, monarchies all over the world were abolished. However, simply abolishing monarchy and replacing it with democracy is not sufficient unless the government men are religious and follow the footsteps of great religious personalities. Text 17. The saintly persons continued, When the king protects the citizens from the disturbances of various or mischievous ministers as well as from thieves and rogues, he can, by virtue of such pious activities, accept taxes given by his subjects. Thus a pious king can certainly enjoy himself in this world as well as in the life after death. Purport. It is the duty of a pious king is described very nicely in this verse. The first and foremost duty is to give protection to the citizens from thieves and rogues as well as from ministers who are no better than thieves and rogues. Formerly, ministers were appointed by the king and were not elected. Consequently, if the king was not very pious or strict, the ministers would become thieves and rogues and exploit the innocent citizens. It is the king's duty to see that there is no increase of thieves and rogues, either in the government secretariat or in the departments of public affairs. If a king cannot give protection to citizens from thieves and rogues both in the government service and in public affairs, he has no right to exact taxes from them. In other words, the king or the government that taxes can levy taxes from the citizens only if the king or government is able to give protection to the citizens from thieves and rogues. In the 12th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, there's a description of these thieves and rogues in government service. As stated, Prajaste Bhakshayi Yanti Malecha Rajanya Rupina. Srimad-Bhagavatam 12.142. Quote, These proud malechas, persons who are less than Shudras, representing themselves as kings, will tyrannize their subjects and their subjects, on the other hand, will cultivate the most vicious practices. Thus, practicing evil habits and behaving foolishly, the subjects will be like their rulers." End quote. The idea is that in the democratic days of Kali Yuga, the general population will fall down to the standard of Shudras. As stated, Kalo Shudra Shambhava, practically the whole population of the world will be Shudra. A Shudra is a fourth-class man and who is only fit to work for the three higher social state class. Being fourth-class men, Shudras are not very intelligent. Since the population has fallen in these democratic days, they can only elect a person in their category, but a government cannot run very well when it is run by Shudras. The second class of men, known as Kshatriyas, are especially meant for governing a country under the direction of saintly persons, Brahmanas, who are supposed to be very intelligent. In other ages, in Satyuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapara Yuga, the general population was not so degraded, and the head of government was never elected. The king was the supreme executive personality, and if he caught any ministers stealing, like thieves and rogues, he would at once have them killed or dismissed from service. It was the duty of the king to kill thieves and rogues, and it was similarly his duty to immediately kill dishonest ministers in government service. By such strict vigilance, the king could run the government very well, and the citizens would be happy to have such a king. The conclusion is that unless the king is perfectly able to give protection to the citizens from rogues and thieves, he has no right to levy taxes from the citizens for his own sense gratification. However, if he gives all protection to the citizens and levies taxes on them, he can live very happily and peacefully in this life, and at the end of this life be elevated to the heavenly kingdom, or even to the Vaikunthas, where he would be happy in all respects. Text 18. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observes the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashram, and where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations. Purport. The state's duty and the citizen's duty are very nicely explained in this verse. These activities of the government head or king, as well as the activities of the citizens, should be so directed that ultimately everyone engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The king, or government head, is supposed to be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and is therefore supposed to see that things go on nicely and that the citizens are situated in the scientific social order comprised of 4 Varnas and 4 Ashrams. In the Vishnu Purana, it is said that unless people are educated or situated in the scientific social order comprised of 4 Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and 4 ashrams, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa, society can never be considered real human society, nor can it make any advancement toward the ultimate goal of human life. It is the duty of the government to see that things go on in terms of Varna and Ashram. As stated herein, Bhagavan Yagya Purusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the Yaga Purusha. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktaram Yagatapasam, Bhagavad Gita 5.29. Krishna is the ultimate purpose of all sacrifice. He is also the enjoyer of all sacrifices, therefore he is known as Yaga Purusha. The word Yaga Purusha indicates Lord Vishnu, or Lord Krishna, or any personality of Godhead in the category of Vishnu Tattva. In perfect human society, people are situated in the orders of Varna and Ashram and are engaged in worshipping Lord Vishnu by their respective activities. Every citizen engaged in an occupation renders service by the resultant actions of his activities, that is, the perfection of life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Yata pravitir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam svakarmana tam abhyarchya siddhim vidanti manava. Quote, by worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, man can, in the performance of his own duty, attain perfection. Bhagavad Gita 18:46. Thus, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Shudras, and Vaishyas must execute their prescribed duties as these duties are stated in the Shastras. In this way, everyone can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. The king or government head has to see that the citizens are thus engaged. In other words, the state or the government must not deviate from its duty by declaring that the state is a secular one which has no interest in whether or not the people advance in Varnashram Dharma. Today, people engaged in government service and people who rule over the citizens have no respect for the Varnashram Dharma. They complacently feel that the state is secular. In such a government, no one can be happy. The people must follow the Varnashram Dharma, and the king must see that they are following it nicely. Text 19. O noble one, if the king sees that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original cause of the cosmic manifestation and the supersoul within everyone, is worshipped, the Lord will be satisfied. Purport. It is a fact that the government's duty is to see that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied by the activities of the people as well as by the activities of the government. There is no possibility of happiness if the government or citizenry have no idea of Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original cause of the cosmic manifestation, or if they have no knowledge of Bhuta Bhavana, who is Vishvatma, or the Supersoul, the soul of everyone's soul. The conclusion is that without engaging in devotional service, neither the citizens nor the government can be happy in any way. At the present moment, neither the king nor the governing body is interested in seeing that the people are engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, they are more interested in advancing the machinery of sense gratification. Consequently, they're becoming more and more implicated in the complex machinery of the stringent laws of nature. People should be freed from the entanglement of the three modes of material nature, and the only process by which this is possible is surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is advised in Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, neither the government nor the people in general have any idea of this. They are simply interested in sense gratification and in being happy in this life. The word Nija Sashene in his own government duty indicates that both the government and the citizens are responsible for the execution of Varnashram Dharma. Once the populace is situated in the Varnashram Dharma, there is every possibility of real life and prosperity both in this world and in the next. Text 20. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipped by the great demigods, controllers of universal affairs. When he is satisfied, nothing is impossible to achieve. For this reason, all the demigods, presiding deities of different planets, as well as the inhabitants of the planets, take great pleasure in offering all kinds of paraphernalia for his worship. Purport. All Vedic civilization is summarized in this verse. All living entities, either on this planet or on other planets, have to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their respective duties. When he is satisfied, all necessities of life are automatically supplied. In the Vedas, it is also stated, Eko Bahanam Yo Vidadati Kaman, Kata Upanishad 2.2.13. From the Vedas, we understand that he is supplying everyone's necessities, and we can actually see that the lower animals, the birds and the bees, have no business or profession, yet they are not dying for want of food. They are all living in nature's way, and they have all the necessities of life, namely eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Human society, however, has artificially created a type of civilization which makes one forgetful of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Modern society even enables one to forget the Supreme Personality of Godhead's grace and mercy. Consequently, modern civilized man is always unhappy and in need of things. People do not know that the ultimate goal of life is to approach Vishnu and satisfy him. They have taken this materialistic way of life as everything and have become captivated by materialistic activities. Indeed, their leaders are always encouraging them to follow this path, and the general populace, being ignorant of the laws of God, is following their blind leaders down the path of unhappiness. In order to rectify this world situation, all people should be trained in Krishna consciousness and act in accordance with the Varnashram system. The state should also see that the people are engaged in satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the primary duty of the state. The Krishna consciousness movement was started to convince the general populace to adopt the best process by which to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus solve all problems. Text 21. Dear King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with the predominating deities, is the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices in all planets. The Supreme Lord is the sum total of the three Vedas, the owner of everything, and the ultimate goal of all austerity. Therefore, your countrymen should engage in performing various sacrifices for your elevation. Indeed, you should always direct them toward the offering of sacrifices. Text 22. When all the Brahmanas engage in performing sacrifices in your kingdom, all the demigods who are plenary expansions of the Lord will be very much satisfied by their activities and will give you your desired result. Therefore, O hero, do not stop the sacrificial performances. If you stop them, you will disrespect the demigods. Text 23. King Vena replied, You are not at all experienced. It is very much regrettable that you are maintaining something which is not religious and are accepting it as religious. Indeed, I think you are giving up your real husband who maintains you and are searching after some paramour to worship. Purport. King Vena was so foolish that he accused the saintly sages of being inexperienced like small children. In other words, he was accusing them of not having perfect knowledge. In this way, he could reject their advice and make accusations against them, comparing them with a woman who does not care for her husband, who maintains her, but goes to satisfy a paramour who does not maintain her. The purpose of this simile is apparent. It is the duty of the Kshatriyas to engage the Brahmanas in different types of religious activities, and the king is supposed to be the maintainer of the Brahmanas. If the Brahmanas do not worship the king and go to the demigods, they are polluted as unchaste women. Text 24. Those who, out of gross ignorance, do not worship the king, who is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, experience happiness neither in this world nor in the world after death. Text 25. You are so much devoted to the demigods, but who are they? Indeed, your affection for these demigods is exactly like the affection of an unchaste woman who neglects her married life and gives all attention to her paramour. Text 26 and 27. Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Indra, Vayu, the master of air, Yama, the superintendent of death, the sun god, the director of rainfall, Kuvera, the treasurer, the moon god, the predominating deity of the earth, Agni, the fire god, Varuna, the lord of waters, and all others who are great and competent to bestow benedictions or to curse, all abide in the body of the king. For this reason, the king is known as the reservoir of all demigods, who are simply parts and parcels of the king's body. Purport. There are many demons who think of themselves as the supreme and present themselves as the directors of the sun, moon, and other planets. This is all due to false pride. Similarly, King Vena developed this demoniac mentality and presented himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such demons are numerous in this age of Kali, and all of them are condemned by great sages and saintly persons. Text 28. King Vena continued, For this reason, O Brahmanas, you should abandon your envy of me, and by your ritualistic activities you should worship me and offer me all paraphernalia. If you are intelligent, you should know that there is no personality superior to me who can accept the first oblations of all sacrifices. Purport. As stated by Krishna himself throughout Bhagavad Gita, there is no truth superior to him. King Vena was imitating the Supreme Personality of Godhead and also speaking out of false pride, presenting himself as the Supreme Lord. These are all characteristics of a demoniac person. Text 29. The great sage Maitreya continued, Thus the king, who became unintelligent due to his sinful life and deviation from the right path, became actually bereft of all good fortune. Thus he could not accept the requests of the great sages, which the sages put before him with great respect, and therefore he was condemned. Purport. The demons certainly cannot have any faith in the word of authorities. In fact, they are always disrespectful to authorities. They manufacture their own religious principles and disobey great personalities like Vyas, Narada, and even the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. As soon as one disobeys authority, he immediately becomes very sinful and loses his good fortune. The king was so puffed up and impudent that he dared disrespect the great saintly personalities, and this brought him ruination. Text 30. My dear Vidura, all good fortune unto you. The foolish king, who thought himself to be very learned, thus insulted the great sages, and the sages, being broken-hearted by the king's words, became very angry at him. Text 31. All the great sages immediately cried, "Kill him! Kill him! He is the most dreadful, sinful person. If he lives, he will certainly turn the whole world into ashes in no time." Purport. Saintly persons are generally very kind to all kinds of living entities, but they are not unhappy when a serpent or a scorpion is killed. It is not good for saintly persons to kill, but they are encouraged to kill demons who are exactly like serpents and scorpions. Therefore, all the saintly sages decided to kill King Vena, who was so dreadfully and dangerous to all human society. We can appreciate the extent to which the saintly sages actually controlled the king. If the king or government becomes demoniac, it is the duty of a saintly person to upset the government and replace it with a deserving person who follows the order and instructions of saintly persons. Text 32. The great saintly sages continued, "This impious, impudent man does not deserve to sit on the throne at all. He is so shameless that he even dared insult the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu." Purport. One should not at any time tolerate blasphemy and insults against Lord Vishnu or his devotees. The devotee is generally very humble and meek, and he is reluctant to pick a quarrel with anyone, nor does he envy anyone. However, a pure devotee immediately becomes fiery and angry when he sees that Lord Vishnu or his devotee is insulted. It is the duty of a devotee. Although a devotee maintains an attitude of meekness and gentleness, it is a great fault on his part if he remains silent when the Lord or his devotee is blasphemed. Text 33. But for King Vena, who is simply inauspicious, who would blaspheme the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose mercy one is awarded all kinds of fortune and opulence? Purport. When human society individually or collectively becomes godless and blasphemes the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is certainly destined for ruination. Such a civilization invites all kinds of bad fortune due to not appreciating the mercy of the Lord. Text 34. The great sages, thus manifesting their covert anger, immediately decided to kill the king. The King Vena was already as good as dead due to his blasphemy against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, without using any weapons, the sages killed King Vena simply by high-sounding words. Text 35. After all the sages returned to their respective hermitages, the mother of King Vena, Sunita, became very much aggrieved because of her son's death. She decided to preserve the dead body of her son by the application of certain ingredients and by chanting mantras. Mantra Yogena. Text 36. Once upon a time, the same saintly persons, after taking their bath in the river Saraswati, began to perform their daily duties by offering oblations into the sacrificial fire. After this, sitting on the bank of the river, they began to talk about the transcendental person and his pastimes. Text 37. In those days, there were various disturbances in the country that were creating a panic in society. Therefore, all the sages began to talk amongst themselves. Since the king is dead, and there is no protector in the world, misfortune may befall the people in general on account of rogues and thieves. Purport. Whenever there is a disturbance in the state or a panic situation, the property and lives of the citizens become unsafe. This is caused by the uprising of various thieves and rogues. At such time, it is to be understood that the ruler or the government is dead. All of these misfortunes happened due to the death of King Vena. Thus, the saintly persons became very anxious for the safety of the people in general. The conclusion is that even though saintly persons have no business in political affairs, they are nonetheless always compassionate upon the people in general. Thus, even though they were always aloof from society, still out of mercy and compassion, they consider how the citizens can peacefully execute their rituals and follow the rules and regulations of the Varnashram Dharma. That was the concern of the sages. In this age of Kali, everything is disturbed. Therefore, saintly persons should take to the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, as recommended in the Shastras, Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalo, Nashteva, 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 Gatirinata. Both for spiritual and material prosperity, everyone should devotedly chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Text 38. When the great sages were carrying on their discussion in this way, they saw a dust storm arising from all directions. This storm was caused by the running of thieves and rogues who were engaged in plundering the citizens. Purport. Thieves and rogues simply await some political upset in order to take an opportunity to plunder the people in general. To keep thieves and rogues inactive in their profession, a strong government is always required. Text 39 and 40. Upon seeing the dust storm, the saintly persons could understand that there were a great deal of irregularities due to the death of King Vena. Without government, the state was devoid of law and order, and consequently there was a great uprising of murderous thieves and rogues who were plundering the riches of the people in general. Although the great sages could subdue the disturbance by their powers, just as they could kill the king, they nonetheless considered it improper on their part to do so. Thus they did not attempt to stop the disturbance. Purport. The saintly persons and great sages killed King Vena out of emergency, but they did not choose to take part in the government in order to subdue the uprising of thieves and rogues, which took place after the death of King Vena. It is not the duty of brahmanas or saintly persons to kill, although sometimes they may do so in case of an emergency. They could kill all the thieves and rogues by the prowess of their mantras, but they thought it the duty of the Kshatriya kings to do so. Thus, they reluctantly did not take part in the killing business. Text 41. The great sages began to think that although a brahmana is peaceful and impartial because he is equal to everyone, it is still not his duty to neglect poor humans. By such neglect, a brahmana's spiritual power diminishes just as water kept in a cracked pot leaks out. Purport. Brahmanas, the topmost section of human society, are mostly devotees. They are generally not aware of the happenings within the material world because they are always busy in their activities for spiritual advancement. Nonetheless, when there is a calamity in human society, they cannot remain impartial. If they do not do something to relieve the distressed condition of human society, it is said that due to such neglect, their spiritual knowledge diminishes. Almost all the sages go to the Himalayas for their personal benefit, but Pṛthu Mahārāja said that he did not want liberation alone. He wanted to wait until he was able to deliver all the fallen souls of this world. In their elevated condition, the Brahmanas are called Vaishnavas. There are two types of Brahmanas, namely Brahmana Pandit and Brahmana Vaishnava. A qualified Brahmana is naturally very learned, but when his learning is advanced in understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes a Brahmana Vaishnava. Unless one becomes a Vaishnava, one's perfection of Brahminical culture is incomplete. The saintly persons considered very wisely that although King Vena was very sinful, he was nonetheless born in a family descending from Dhruva Maharaj. Therefore, the semina in the family must be protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Keshava. As such, the sages wanted to take some steps to relieve the situation. For want of a king, everything was being disturbed and turned topsy-turvy. Text 42. The sages decided that the descendants of the family of the saintly king Anga should not be stopped because in this family the Samana was very powerful and the children were prone to become devotees of the Lord. Purport. The purity of hereditary succession is called Amogavirya. The pious seminal succession of the twice-born family of the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas especially, as well as in the families of the Vaishyas also, must be kept very pure by the observation of the purificatory processes beginning with Garbhodan Samskar, which is observed before giving birth to a child. Unless this purificatory process is strictly observed, especially by the Brahmanas, the family descendants become impure and gradually sinful activities become visible in the family. Maharaj Anga was very pure because of his purification of the purification of Samana in the family of Maharaj Dhruva. However, his Samana became contaminated in association with his wife, Sunita, who happened to be the daughter of death personified. Because of this polluted Samana, King Vena was produced. This was a catastrophe in the family of Dhruva Maharaj. All the saintly persons and sages considered this point, and they decided to take action in this manner, as described in the following verses. Text 43. After making a decision, the saintly persons and sages churned the thighs of the dead body of King Vena with great force and according to a specific method. As a result of this churning, a dwarf-like person was born from King Vena's body. Purport. That a person was born by the churning of the thighs of King Vena proves that the spirit soul is individual and separate from the body. The great sages and saintly persons could beget another person from the body of the dead King Vena, but it was not possible for them to bring King Vena back to life. King Vena was gone, and certainly he had taken another body. The saintly persons and sages were only concerned with the body of Vena because it was a result of the seminal succession in the family of Maharaja Dhruva. Consequently, the ingredients by which another body could be produced was there in the body of King Vena. By a certain process, when the thighs of the dead body were churned, another body came out. Although dead, the body of King Vena was preserved by drugs and mantras chanted by King Vena's mother. In this way, the ingredients for the production of another body were there. And when the body of the person named Bahuka came out of the dead body of King Vena, it was really not very astonishing. It was simply a question of knowing how to do it. From the semina of one body, another body is produced, and the life symptoms are visible due to the soul's taking shelter of this body. One should not think that it was impossible for another body to come out of the dead body of King Vena. This was performed by the skillful action of the sages. Text 44. This person from King Vena's thighs was named Bahuka, and his complexion was as black as a crow's. All the limbs of his body were very short, his arms and legs were short, and his jaws were large. His nose was flat, his eyes were reddish, and his hair copper-colored. Text 45. He was very submissive and meek, and immediately after his birth he bowed down and inquired, "Sirs, what should I do?" The sages replied, "Please sit down, Nishida." Thus Nishida, the father of Nishada race, was born. Purport. It is said in the Shastras that the head of the body represents the Brahmanas, the arms represent the Kshatriyas, the abdomen represents the Vaishyas, and the legs, beginning with the thighs, represents the Shudras. The Shudras are sometimes called black or Krishna. The Brahmanas are called Shukla or white, and the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas are a mixture of black and white. However, those who are extraordinarily white are said to have skin produced out of white leprosy. It may be concluded that white or a golden hue is the color of the higher caste, and black is the complexion of the Shudras. Text 46. After his, Nishada's birth, he immediately took charge of all the resultant reactions of King Vena's sinful activities. As such, this Nishida class is always engaged in sinful activities like stealing, plundering, and hunting. Consequently, they are only allowed to live in the hills and forests. Purport. The Nishidas, or Nishadas, are not allowed to live in cities and towns because they are sinful by nature. As such, their bodies are very ugly, and their occupations are also sinful. We should, however, know that even these sinful men, who are sometimes called Kiratas, can be delivered from their sinful condition to the topmost Vaishnava platform by the mercy of a pure devotee. Engagement in the transcendental, loving, devotional service of the Lord can make anyone, however sinful he may be, fit to return home back to Godhead. One has only to become free from all contamination by the process of devotional service. In this way, everyone can become fit to return home back to Godhead. This is confirmed by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita. Mam hi partha vipashtita yepi shu papayoni astriya vaishas tata shudras tepi yanti get param gatim. Quote, O son of Pṛthu, those who take shelter of me, be they of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, as well as Shudras, workers, can approach the supreme destination. Bhagavad Gita 9:32. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 4th canto, 14th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The Story of King Vena. The following is a free-for-download audiobook from the website krishnapath.org. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Part 2, Chapter 15. King Prithu's Appearance and Coronation. Text 1. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, thus the Brahmanas and the great sages churned the 2 arms of King Vena's dead body. As a result, a male and female couple came out of his arms. Text 2. The great sages were highly learned in Vedic knowledge. When they saw the male and female born of the arms of Vena's body, they were very pleased, for they could understand that the couple was an expansion of the plenary portion of Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The method adopted by the great sages and scholars who were learned in Vedic knowledge was perfect. They removed all the reactions of King Vena's sinful activities by seeing that King Vena first gave birth to Bahuka, described in the previous chapter. After King Vena's body was thus purified, a male and female came out of it, and the great sages could understand that this was an expansion of Lord Vishnu. This expansion, of course, was not Vishnu Tattva, but specifically empowered expansion of the Lord Vishnu known as Avesha. Text 3. The great sages said, The male is a plenary expansion of the power of Lord Vishnu who maintains the entire universe, and the female is a plenary expansion of the goddess of fortune who is never separated from the Lord. Purport. The significance of the goddess of fortunes never being separated from the Lord is clearly mentioned herein. People in the material world are very fond of the goddess of fortune, and they want her favor in the form of riches. They should know, however, that the goddess of fortune is inseparable from Lord Vishnu. Materialists should understand that the goddess of fortune should be worshipped along with Lord Vishnu, and should not be regarded separately. Materialists seeking the favor of goddess of fortune must worship Lord Vishnu and Lakshmi together to maintain material opulence. If a materialist follows the policy of Ravana, who wanted to separate Sita from Lord Ramchandra, the process of separation will vanquish him. Those who are very rich and have taken favor of the goddess of fortune in this world must engage their money in the service of the Lord. In this way, they can continue in their opulent position without disturbance. Text 4. Of the 2, the male will be able to expand his reputation throughout the world. His name will be Prithu. Indeed, he will be the first among kings. Purport. There are different types of incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Shastras, it is said that Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva and Ananta are all very powerful incarnations of the Brahman feature of the Lord. Similarly, Sachipita, or Indra, the king of heaven, is an incarnation of the lusty feature of the Lord. Aniruddha is an incarnation of the Lord's mind. Similarly, King Prithu is an incarnation of the ruling force of the Lord. Thus, the saintly persons and great sages predicted the future activities of King Prithu, who was already explained as a partial incarnation of the plenary expansion of the Lord. Text 5. The female has such beautiful teeth and beautiful qualities that she will actually beautify the ornaments she wears. Her name will be Archie. In the future, she will accept King Prithu as her husband. Text 6. In the form of King Prithu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has spread through a part of his potency to protect the people of the world. The goddess of fortune is the constant companion of the Lord, and therefore she has incarnated partially as Archie to become King Prithu's queen. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that whenever one sees an extraordinary power, he should conclude that a specific partial representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present. There are innumerable such personalities, but not all of them are direct Vishnu Tattva plenary expansions of the Lord. Many living entities are classified among the Vishnu or Shakti Tattvas. Such incarnations, empowered for specific purposes, are known as Shaktivesh avatars. King Prithu was such a Shaktivesh avatar of the Lord. Similarly, Archie, King Prithu's wife, was a Shaktivesh avatar of the goddess of fortune. Text 7. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Viduraji, at that time all the Brahmanas highly praised and glorified King Prithu, and the best singers of Gandharva Loka chanted his glories. The inhabitants of Siddha Loka showered flowers, and the beautiful women in the heavenly planets danced in ecstasy. Text 8. Conch shells, drums, bugles, and kettle drums vibrated in outer space. Great sages, forefathers, and personalities from the heavenly planets all came to Earth from various planetary systems. Text 9 and 10. Lord Brahma, the master of the entire universe, arrived there accompanied by all the demigods and their chiefs. Seeing the lines of Lord Vishnu's palms on King Prithu's right hand, an impression of the lotus flower on the soles of his feet, Lord Brahma could understand that King Prithu was a partial representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One whose palm bears the sign of a disc, as well as other such lines, should be considered a partial representation or incarnation of the Supreme Lord. Purport. There is a system by which one can detect an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nowadays, it has become a cheap fashion to accept any rascal as an incarnation of God, but from this incident we can see that Lord Brahma personally examined the hands and feet of King Prithu for specific signs. In their prophecies, the learned sages and Brahmanas accepted King Maharaj Prithu as a plenary partial expansion of the Lord. During the presence of Lord Krishna, however, the king declared himself Vasudeva, and Lord Krishna killed him. Before accepting someone as an incarnation of God, one should verify his identity according to the symptoms mentioned in the Shastras. Without these symptoms, the pretender is subject to be killed by the authorities for pretending to be an incarnation of God. Text 11. The learned Brahmanas, who were very attached to the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies, then arranged for the king's coronation. People from all directions collected all the different paraphernalia for the ceremony. Thus everything was complete. Text 12. All the rivers, seas, hills, mountains, serpents, cows, birds, animals, heavenly planets, and the earthly planet, and all other living entities collected various presentations according to their ability to offer the king. Text 13. Thus, the great King Prithu, exquisitely dressed with garments and ornaments, was coronated and placed on the throne. The king and his wife, Archie, who was also exquisitely ornamented, appeared exactly like fire. Text 14. The great sage continued, My dear Vidura, Kuvera presented the great King Prithu a golden throne. The demigod Varuna presented him an umbrella that constantly sprayed fine particles of water and was as brilliant as the moon. Text 15. The demigod of air, Vayu, presented King Prithu 2 whisks, chamaras, of hair, and the king of religion, Dharma, presented him a flower garland which would expand his fame. The king of heaven, Indra, presented him with a valuable helmet, and the superintendent of death, Yamaraj, presented him a scepter with which to rule the world. Text 16. Lord Brahma presented King Prithu a protective garment made of spiritual knowledge. Bharati, Saraswati, the wife of Brahma, gave him a transcendental necklace. Lord Vishnu presented him a Sudarshan disc, and Lord Vishnu's wife, the goddess of fortune, gave him imperishable opulences. Purport. All the demigods presented various gifts to King Prithu. Hari, an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Upendra in the heavenly planet, presented the king a Sudarshan disc. It should be understood that this Sudarshan disc is not exactly the same type of Sudarshan disc used by the Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Vishnu. Since Maharaj Prithu was a partial representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's power, the Sudarshan disc given to him represented the partial power of the original Sudarshan disc. Text 17. Lord Shiva presented him with a sword within a sheath marked with 10 moons, and his wife, the goddess Durga, presented him with a shield marked with 100 moons. The moon demigod presented him horses made of nectar, and the demigod Vishwakarma presented him a very beautiful chariot. Text 18. The demigod of fire, Agni, presented him a bow made of the horns of goats and cows. The sun god presented him arrows as brilliant as sunshine. The predominating deity of Bhuloka presented him slippers full of mystic power. The demigods from outer space brought him presentations of flowers again and again. Purport. This verse describes that the king's slippers were invested with mystic powers. Paduke Yoga Mayo. Thus, as soon as the king placed his feet in the slippers, they would immediately carry him to wherever he desired. Mystic yogis can transfer themselves from one place to another wherever they desire. A similar power was invested in the slippers of King Prithu. Text 19. The demigods who always travel in outer space gave King Prithu the arts to perform dramas, sing songs, play musical instruments, and disappear at his will. The great sages also offered him infallible blessings. The ocean offered him a conch shell produced from the ocean. Text 20. The seas, mountains, and rivers gave him room to drive his chariot without impediments, and a Sutta, a Magadha, and a Vandi offered prayers and praises. They all presented themselves before him to perform their respective duties. Text 21. Thus, when the greatly powerful King Prithu, the son of Vena, saw the professionals before him, to congratulate them he smiled, and with the gravity of the vibrating sounds of the clouds, he spoke as follows. Text 22. King Prithu said, O gentle Sutta, Magadha, and other devotee offering prayers, the qualities of which you have spoken are not distinct in me. Then why should you praise me for all these qualities when I do not shelter these features? I do not wish for these words meant for me to go in vain, but it is better that they be offered to someone else. Purport. The prayers and praises by the Sutta, Magadha, and Vandi all explain the good godly qualities of Maharaj Prithu, for he was a Shaktivesh incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because the qualities were not yet manifest, however, King Prithu very humbly asked why the devotees should praise him with such exalted words. He did not want anyone to offer him prayers or glorify him unless he possessed the real qualities of which they spoke. The offering of prayers was certainly appropriate, for he was an incarnation of Godhead, but he warned that one should not be accepted as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without having the godly qualities. At the present moment, there are many so-called incarnations of the Personality of Godhead, but these are merely fools and rascals whom people accept as incarnations of God, although they have no godly qualities. King Prithu desired that his real characteristics in the future might justify such words of praise. Although there was no fault in the prayers offered, Pṛthu Mahārāja indicated that such prayers should not be offered to an unfit person who pretends to be an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 23. O gentle reciters, offer such prayers in due course of time, when the qualities of which you have spoken actually manifest themselves in me. The gentle who offer prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead do not attribute such qualities to a human being who does not actually have them. Purport. Gentle devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead know perfectly well who is God and who is not. Non-devotee impersonalists, however, who have no idea what God is and who never offer prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are always interested in accepting a human being as God and offering such prayers to him. This is the difference between a devotee and a demon. Demons manufacture their own gods, or a demon himself claims to be God, following in the footsteps of Ravana and Hiranyakashipu. Although Pṛthu Mahārāja was factually an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he nonetheless rejected those praises because the qualities of the Supreme Person were not yet manifest in him. He wanted to stress that one who does not actually possess these qualities should not try to engage his followers and devotees in offering him glory for them, even though these qualities might be manifest in the future. If a man who does not factually possess the attributes of a great personality engages his followers in praising him with the expectation that such attributes will develop in the future, that sort of praise is actually an insult. Text 24. How could an intelligent man, competent enough to possess such exalted qualities, allow his followers to praise him if he did not actually have them? Praising a man by saying that if he were educated he might have become a great scholar or a great personality is nothing but a process of cheating. A foolish person who agrees to accept such praise does not know that such words simply insult him. Purport. Pṛthu Mahārāja was an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Lord Brahma and other demigods had already testified when they had presented the king with many heavenly gifts. Because he had just been coronated, however, he could not manifest his godly qualities in action. Therefore, he was not willing to accept the praise of the devotees. So-called incarnations of Godhead should therefore take lessons from the behavior of King Pṛthu. Demons without any godly qualities should not accept false praise from their followers. Text 25. As a person with a sense of honor and magnanimity does not like to hear about his abominable actions, a person who is very famous and powerful does not like to hear himself praised. Text 26. King Pṛthu continued, My dear devotees, headed by the sutta, just now, I'm not very famous for my personal activities because I have not done anything praiseworthy you could glorify. Therefore, how could I engage you in praising my activities? Exactly like children. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 15th chapter, 4th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled King Pṛthu's Appearance and Coronation. The following is a free-for-download audiobook from the website krishnapath.org. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Part 2, Chapter 16. Praise of King Pṛthu by the Professional Reciters. Text 1. The great sage Maitreya continued, While King Pṛthu thus spoke, the humility of his nectarian speeches pleased the reciters very much. Then again, they continued to praise the king highly with exalted prayers, as they had been instructed by the great sages. Purport. Here the word Muni Chotida indicates instructions received from great sages and saintly persons. Although Maharaja Prithu was simply enthroned on the royal seat and was not at that time exhibiting his godly powers, nonetheless the reciters like the Sutta, the Magadha, and the Vandi understood that King Prithu was an incarnation of God. They could understand that by the instructions given by the great sages and learned brahmanas. We have to understand the incarnations of God by the instructions of authorized persons. We cannot manufacture a God by our own concoctions. As stated by Narottam Das Thakur, Sadhu Shastra Guru, one has to test all spiritual matters according to the instructions of saintly persons, scriptures, and the spiritual master. The spiritual master is one who follows the instructions of his predecessors, namely the sadhus or saintly persons. A bona fide spiritual master does not mention anything that is not mentioned in the authorized scriptures. Ordinary people have to follow the instructions of sadhu, shastra, and guru. Those statements made in the shastras and those made by the bona fide gurus or sadhu cannot differ from one another. Reciters like the Sutta and the Magadha were confidentially aware that King Prithu was an incarnation of the personality of Godhead. Although the king denied such praise because he was not at that time exhibiting his godly qualities, the reciters nonetheless did not stop praising him. Rather, they were very pleased with the king, who, although actually an incarnation of God, was so humble and delightful in his dealings with devotees. In this connection, we may note that previously, 4:15:21, it was mentioned that King Prithu was smiling and was in a pleasant mood while speaking to the reciters. Thus, we have to learn from the Lord or his incarnation how to become gentle and humble. The king's behavior was very pleasing to the reciters, and consequently the reciters continued their praise, even foretold the king's future activities as they had been instructed by the sadhus and sages. Text 2. The reciters continued, "Dear King, you are a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, and by his causeless mercy you have descended on this earth. Therefore it is not possible for us to actually glorify your exalted activities. Although you have appeared through the body of King Vena, even great orators and speakers like Lord Brahma and other demigods cannot exactly describe the glorious activities of your lordship." Purport. In this verse, the word Mayaya means, quote, "by your causeless mercy," end quote. The Mayavadi philosophers explained the word Maya as meaning illusion or falseness. However, there is another meaning of Maya, that is, quote, "causeless mercy," end quote. There are two kinds of Maya, Yoga Maya and Maha Maya. Maha Maya is an expansion of Yoga Maya, and both these Mayas are different expansions of the Lord's internal potencies. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord appears through his internal potencies, Atma Mayaya. We should therefore reject the Mayavadi explanation that the Lord appeared in a body given by the external potency, the material energy. The Lord and his incarnation are fully independent and can appear anywhere and everywhere by virtue of the internal potency. Although born out of the so-called dead body of King Vena, King Prithu was still an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the Lord's internal potency. The Lord can appear in any family. Sometimes he can appear as a fish incarnation, Matsya avatar, or a boar incarnation, Varaha avatar. Thus, the Lord is completely free and independent to appear anywhere and everywhere by his internal potency. It is stated that Ananta, an incarnation of the Lord who has unlimited mouths, cannot reach the end of his glorification of the Lord, although Ananta has been describing the Lord since time immemorial. So, what to speak of demigods like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and others? It is said that the Lord is Shiva Vicini Nutam, always worshipped by demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. If the demigods cannot find adequate language to express the glories of the Lord, then what to speak of others? Consequently, reciters like the Sutta and Magadha felt inadequate to speak about King Prithu. By glorifying the Lord with exalted verses, one becomes purified. Although we are unable to offer prayers to the Lord in an adequate fashion, our duty is to make the attempt in order to purify ourselves. It is not that we should stop our glorification because demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva cannot adequately glorify the Lord. Rather, as stated by Pṛthu Mahārāja, everyone should glorify the Lord according to his own ability. If we are serious and sincere devotees, the Lord will give us the intelligence to offer prayers properly. Text 3. Although we are unable to glorify you adequately, we nonetheless have a transcendental taste to glorify your activities. We shall try to glorify you according to the instructions received from the authoritative sages and scholars. Whatever we speak, however, is always inadequate and very insignificant. Dear King, because you are a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all your activities are liberal and ever laudable. Purport. However expert one may be, he can never describe the glories of the Lord adequately. Nonetheless, those engaged in glorifying the activities of the Lord should try to do so as far as possible. Such an attempt will please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya has advised all his followers to go everywhere and preach the message of Lord Krishna. Since this message is essentially Bhagavad Gita, the preacher's duty is to study Bhagavad Gita as it is understood by disciplic succession and explained by great sages and learned devotees. One should speak to the general populace in accordance with one's predecessors, sadhu, guru, and shastras. This simple process is the easiest method by which one can glorify the Lord. Devotional service, however, is the real method, and for by devotional service one can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead with just a few words. Without devotional service, volumes of books cannot satisfy the Lord. Even though preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement may be unable to describe the glories of the Lord, they can nonetheless go everywhere and request people to chant Hare Krishna. Text 4. This king, Maharaj Prithu, is the best amongst those who are following religious principles. As such, he will engage everyone in the pursuit of religious principles and give them all protection. He will also be a great chastiser to the irreligious and atheistic. Purport. The duty of the king or the head of the government is described very nicely in this verse. It is the duty of the governmental head to see that the people strictly follow a religious life. A king should also be strict in chastising the atheists. In other words, an atheistic or godless government should never be supported by a king or governmental chief. That is the test of good government. In the name of secular government, the king or governmental head remains neutral and allows people to engage in all sorts of irreligious activities. In such a state, people cannot be happy, despite all economic development. However, in this age of Kali, there are no pious kings. Instead, rogues and thieves are elected to the head of government. But how can the people be happy without religion and God consciousness? The rogues exact taxes from the citizens for their own sense enjoyment, and in the future the people will be so much harassed that according to Srimad-Bhagavatam they will flee from their homes and country and take shelter in the forest. However, in Kali Yuga, democratic government can be captured by Krishna-conscious people. If this can be done, the general populace can be made very happy. Text 5. This king alone, in his own body, will be able in due course of time to maintain all living entities and keep them in a pleasant condition by manifesting himself as different demigods to perform various departmental activities. Thus, he will maintain the upper planetary system by inducing the populace to perform Vedic sacrifices. In due course of time, he will also maintain this earthly planet by discharging proper rainfall. Purport. The demigods in charge of the various departmental activities that maintain this world are but assistants to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When an incarnation of Godhead descends on this planet, demigods like the sun god, the moon god, the king of heaven, Indra, all join him. Consequently, the incarnation of Godhead is able to act for the departmental demigods to keep the planetary systems in order. The protection of the earthly planet is dependent on proper rainfall. As stated in Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, sacrifices are performed to please those demigods who are in charge of rainfall. Nad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anashambhava yagnat bhavanti parjanyo yagnas karma samandbhuva. All living entities subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of jaga, sacrifice, and jaga is born of prescribed duties. End quote. Bhagavad Gita 3:14. Thus, the proper execution of yaga, sacrifice, is required. As indicated herein, King Prithu alone would induce all the citizens to engage in such sacrificial activities so that there would not be scarcity or distress. In Kali Yuga, however, in the so-called secular state, the executive branch of government is in charge of so-called kings and presidents who are all fools and rascals, ignorant of the intricacies of nature's causes and ignorant of the principles of sacrifice. Such rascals simply make various plans which always fail, and the people subsequently suffer disturbances. To counteract this situation, the Shastras advise, Harinam, Harinam, Harinam eva kevalam, kalo nashteva, nashteva, nashteva gatiranita. Thus, in order to counteract this unfortunate situation in government, the general populace is advised to chant the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Text 6. This King Prithu will be as powerful as the sun god, and just as the sun god equally distributes his sunshine to everyone, King Prithu will distribute his mercy equally. Similarly, just as the sun god evaporates water for 8 months and during the rainy season returns it profusely, similarly this king will also exact taxes from the citizens and return these monies in times of need. Purport. The process of tax exaction is very nicely explained in this verse. Tax exaction is not meant for the sense gratification of the so-called administrative heads. Tax revenues should be distributed to the citizens in times of need during emergencies such as famine or flood. Tax revenues should never be distributed amongst government servants in the form of high salaries and various other allowances. In Kali Yuga, however, the position of the citizens is very horrible because taxes are exacted in so many forms and are spent for the personal comforts of the administrators. The example of the sun in this verse is very appropriate. The sun is many millions of miles away from the earth, and although the sun does not actually touch the earth, it manages to distribute land all over the planet by extracting water from the oceans and seas, and it also manages to make that land fertile by distributing water during the rainy season. As an ideal king, King Prithu would execute all this business in the village and state as expertly as the sun. Text 7. This King Prithu will be very, very kind to all citizens. Even though a poor person may trample over the king's head by violating the rules and regulations, the king, out of his causeless mercy, will be forgetful and forgiving. As a protector of the world, he will be as tolerant as the earth itself. Purport. King Prithu is herein compared to the earthly planet as far as his tolerance is concerned. Although the earth is always trampled upon by men and animals, it still gives food to them by producing grains, fruits, and vegetables. As an ideal king, Mahārāja Prithu is compared to the earthly planet, for even though some citizens might violate the rules and regulations of the state, he would still be tolerant and maintain them with fruits and grains. In other words, it is the duty of the king to look after the comforts of the citizens, even at the cost of his own personal convenience. This is not the case, however, in Kali Yuga, for in Kali Yuga the kings and heads of state enjoy life at the cost of taxes exacted from the citizens. Such unfair taxation make the people dishonest, and the people try to hide their income in so many ways. Eventually, the state will not be able to collect taxes, and consequently, they will not be able to meet its huge military and administrative expenses. Everything will collapse, and there will be chaos and disturbance all over the state. Text 8. When there is no rainfall and the citizens are in great danger due to scarcity of water, this royal personality of Godhead will be able to supply rains exactly like the heavenly king Indra. Thus he will very easily be able to protect the citizens from drought. Purport. King Prithu is very appropriately compared to the sun and the demigod Indra. King Indra of the heavenly planets is in charge of distributing water over the earth and other planetary systems. It is indicated that King Prithu would arrange for the distribution of rainfall personally if Indra failed to discharge his duty properly. It is, however, indicated that sometimes the king of heaven, Indra, would become angry at the inhabitants of the earth if they did not offer sacrifices to appease him. However, being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, King Prithu did not depend on the mercy of the heavenly king. It is foretold herein that if there would be any scarcity of rain, King Prithu would manage to counteract the deficiency by virtue of his godly powers. Such powers were also exhibited by Lord Krishna when he was present in Vrindavan. Indeed, when Indra poured incessant water on Vrindavan for 7 days, the inhabitants were protected by Krishna, who raised Govardhan Hill over their heads as a great umbrella. Thus, Lord Krishna is also known as Govardhandari. Text 9. This king, Pṛthu Mahārāja, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful full face, which is always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life. Text 10. The reciters continued, No one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He will be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, is covered all around by water. Purport. There is a predominating deity for all the material elements, and Varuna, or Pracheta, is the predominating deity of the seas and oceans. From outward appearances, the seas and oceans appear devoid of life, but a person acquainted with the sea knows that within the water exists many varieties of life. The king of that underwater kingdom is Varuna. Just as no one can understand what is going beneath the sea, no one can understand what policy King Prithu was following to make everything successful. Indeed, King Prithu's path of diplomacy was very grave. His success was made possible because he was a reservoir of unlimited glorified qualities. The word Upagupta Vita is very significant in this verse. It indicates that no one would know the extent of the riches King Prithu would confidentially keep. The idea is that not only the king, but everyone should keep his hard-earned money confidentially and secretly so that in due course of time, the money can be spent for good practical purposes. In Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and the only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government will artificially inflate the currency by simply printing papers, and this artificially raises the price of commodities, and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. Thus, keeping one's money very secretly is an old practice, for we find this practice present even during the reign of Maharaja Prithu. Just as the king has the right to keep his treasury confidential and secret, the people should also keep their individual earnings a secret. There is no fault in such dealings. The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashram Dharma so that the money is spent only for good causes and nothing else. Text 11. King Prithu was born of the dead body of King Vena, as fire is produced from Arani wood. Thus, King Prithu will always remain just like fire, and his enemies will not be able to approach him. Indeed, he will be unbearable to his enemies, for although staying very near him, they will never be able to approach him, but will always have to remain as if far away. No one will be able to overcome the strength of King Prithu. Purport. Arani wood is a kind of fuel used to ignite fire by friction. At the time of performing sacrifices, one can ignite a fire from Arani wood. Although born of his dead father, King Prithu would still remain just like fire. Just as fire is not easily approached, similarly King Prithu would be unapproachable by his enemies, even though they would appear to be very near him. Text 12. King Prithu will be able to see all the internal and external activities of every one of his citizens. Still, no one will be able to know his system of espionage, and he himself will remain neutral regarding all matters of glorification or vilification paid to him. He will be exactly like air, the life force within the body, which is exhibited internally and externally, but is always neutral to all affairs. Text 13. Since this king will always remain on the path of piety, he will be neutral to both his son and the son of his enemy. If the son of his enemy is not punishable, he will not punish him. But if his son is punishable, he will immediately punish him. Purport. These are the characteristics of an impartial ruler. It is the duty of a ruler to punish the criminal and give protection to the innocent. King Prithu was so neutral that if his own son were punishable, he would not hesitate to punish him. On the other hand, if the son of his enemy were innocent, he would not engage in some intrigue in order to punish him. Text 14. Just as the sun god expands his shining rays up to the Arctic region without impedance, the influence of King Prithu will cover all tracts of land up to the Arctic region and will remain undisturbed as long as he lives. Purport. Although the Arctic region is not visible to ordinary persons, the sun nonetheless shines there without impediment. Just as no one can check the sunshine from spreading all over the universe, so no one could check the influence and reign of King Prithu, which would remain undisturbed as long as he lived. The conclusion is that the sunshine and the sun god cannot be separated, so nor can King Prithu and his ruling strength be separated. His rule over everyone would continue without disturbance. Thus the king could not be separated from his ruling power. Text 15. The king will please everyone by his practical activities, and all of his citizens will remain very satisfied. Because of this, the citizens will take great satisfaction in accepting him as their ruling king. Text 16. The king will be firmly determined and always situated in truth. He will be a lover of the Brahminical culture and will render all service to old men and give shelter to all surrendered souls. Giving respect to all, he will always be merciful to the poor and innocent. Purport. The word Vriddha Shevaka is very significant. Vriddha means old men. There are two kinds of old men. One is old by age and another is old by knowledge. This Sanskrit word indicates that one can be older by the advancement of knowledge. King Prithu was very respectful to the Brahmanas, and he protected them. He also protected persons advanced in age. Whatever the king would decide to do, no one would be able to stop. That is called Drida Sankalpa or Drida Vrata. Text 17. The king will respect all women as if they were his own mother, and he will treat his own wife as the other half of his body. He will be just like an affectionate father to his citizens, and he will treat himself as the most obedient servant of the devotees who always preach the glories of the Lord. Purport. A learned man treats all women except his wife as his mother, looks on others' property as garbage in the street, and treats others as he would treat his own self. These are the symptoms of a learned person as described by Chanakya Pandit. This should be the standard for education. Education does not mean having academic degrees only. One should execute what he has learned in his personal life. These learned characteristics were verily manifest in the life of King Prithu. Although he was king, he treated himself as a servant of the Lord's devotees. According to Vedic etiquette, if a devotee came to the king's palace, the king would immediately offer his own seat to him. The word Brahmavadinam is very significant. Brahmavadi refers to the devotees of the Lord. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are different terms for the Supreme Brahman, and the Supreme Brahman is Lord Krishna. This is accepted in Bhagavad Gita by Arjuna. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. Bhagavad Gita 10:12. Thus the word Paramvadinam refers to the devotees of the Lord. The state should always serve the devotees of the Lord, and the ideal state should conduct itself according to the instructions of the devotee. Because King Prithu followed this principle, he is highly praised. Text 18. The king will consider all embodied living entities as dear as his own self, and he will always be increasing the pleasure of his friends. He will intimately associate with liberated persons, and he will be a chastising hand to all impious persons. Purport. The word Dehinam refers to those who are embodied. The living entities are embodied in different forms, which number 8,400,000 species. All of these were treated by the king in the same way he would treat himself. In this age, however, so-called kings and presidents do not treat all other living entities as their own self. Most of them are meat-eaters, and even though they may not be meat-eaters, and may pose themselves to be very religious and pious, they still allow cow slaughter within their state. Such sinful heads of state cannot actually be popular at any time. Another significant word in this verse is Mukta Sangha Prasanga, which indicates that the king will always associate with liberated persons. Text 19. This king is the master of the three worlds, and he is directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is without change, and he is an incarnation of the Supreme known as Shaktivesh Avatar. Being a liberated soul and completely learned, he understands that all material varieties are without meaning because their basic principle is nescience. Purport. The reciters of these prayers are describing the transcendental qualities of Pṛthu Mahārāja. These qualities are summarized in the words Shakshad Bhagavan. This indicates that Mahārāja Pṛthu is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and therefore possesses unlimited good qualities. Being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahārāja Pṛthu could not be equaled in his excellent qualities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is fully equipped with 6 kinds of opulences, and King Pṛthu was also empowered in such a way that he could display these 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full. The word Katushta, or Katashta, meaning, quote, without change, end quote, is also very significant. There are 2 kinds of living entities, Nitya Mukta and Nitya Baddha. And Nitya Mukta never forgets his position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who does not forget this position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is Nitya Mukta. Such a Nitya Mukta living entity represents the Supersoul as his expansion, as stated in the Vedas, Nityo Nityanam. Thus, the Nitya Mukta living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or the Supreme Eternal Personality of Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity who is Nityabada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmana Gavi Hastini Suni Chaiva Swapakayacha Pandita Samadarshana. Quote, the learned sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater, outcast. End quote. Bhagavad Gita 5:18. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, avidya rachitam. Being a Saktivesh avatar empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Pṛthu Mahārāja did not change his spiritual position, and consequently there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Text 20. This king, being uniquely powerful and heroic, will have no competitor. He will travel around the globe on his victorious chariot, holding his invincible bow in his hand and appearing exactly like the sun, which rotates in its own orbit from the south. Purport. In this verse, the word yatarka indicates that the sun is not fixed, but it is rotating in its orbit, which is set by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita and also in other parts of Srimad-Bhagavatam. In the 5th canto, Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is stated that the sun rotates in its orbit at the rate of 16,000 miles per second. Similarly, Brahma Samhita states, Yashya Yagya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakra. The sun rotates in its own orbit according to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The conclusion is that the sun is not fixed in one place. As far as Maharaja Prithu was concerned, it is indicated that his ruling power would extend all over the world. The Himalayan mountains from which sunrise is first seen are called Udyayachala or Udyayadri. It is herein indicated that Pṛthu Mahārāja's reign over the world would cover even the Himalayan mountains and extend to the borders of all oceans and seas. In other words, his reign would cover the entire planet. Another significant word in this verse is Naradev. As described in previous verses, the qualified king, be he King Pṛthu or any other king who rules over the state as an ideal king, should be understood to be God in human form. According to Vedic culture, the king is honored as the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he represents Narayan, who also gives protection to the citizens. He is therefore Nata, or the proprietor. Even Sanatana Goswami gave respect to the Nawab Hasan Shah as Naradev, although the Nawab was Mohammedan. A king or governmental head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that his citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfectional stage for the head of any government or state. Text 21. When the king travels all over the world, other kings, as well as the demigods, will offer him all kinds of presentations. Their queens will also consider him the original king, who carries in his hands the emblems of club and disc, and will sing of his fame, for he will be as reputable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. As far as reputation is concerned, King Pṛthu is already known as the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Adi Raja means the original king. The original king is Narayan, or Lord Vishnu. People do not know that the original king, or Narayan, is actually the protector of all living entities, as confirmed in the Vedas, Eko Bahonam Yo Vedadati Kaman, Katha Upanishad 2.2.13. Actually, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is maintaining all living entities. The king, or Naradev, is his representative. As such, the king's duty is to personally supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. If he does so, he will be as respectable as Narayan. As mentioned in this verse, Tad Yasha, Pṛthu Mahārāja was actually carrying with him the reputation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he was actually reigning over the world in that capacity. Text 22. This king, this protector of the citizens, is an extraordinary king and is equal to the Prajapati demigods. For the living facility for all citizens, he will milk the earth, which is like a cow. Not only that, but he will level the surface of the earth with the pointed ends of his bow, breaking all the hills exactly as King Indra, the heavenly king, breaks mountains with his powerful thunderbolt. Text 33. When the lion travels in the forest with its tail upward, all menial animals hide themselves. Similarly, when King Prithu will travel over the kingdom and vibrate the string of his bow, which is made of the horns of goats and bulls and is irresistible in battle, all demoniac rogues and thieves will hide themselves in all directions. Purport. It is very appropriate to compare a powerful king like Prithu to a lion. In India, Kshatriya kings are still called Singha, which means lion. Unless rogues, thieves, and other demonic people in a state are afraid of the executive head, who rules the kingdom with a strong hand, there cannot be peace or prosperity in the state. Thus, it is most regrettable when a woman becomes the executive head instead of such a lion-like king. In such a situation, the people are considered very unfortunate. Text 24. At the source of the river Saraswati, this king will perform 100 sacrifices known as Ashwamedha. In the course of the last sacrifice, the heavenly king Indra will steal the sacrificial horse. Text 25. This king Prithu will meet Sanat Kumar, one of the 4 Kumars, in the garden of his palace compound. The king will worship him with devotion and will be fortunate to receive instructions by which one can enjoy transcendental bliss. Purport. The word Vedanti refers to one who knows something or enjoys something. When a person is properly instructed by a spiritual master and understands transcendental bliss, he enjoys life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma bhutas prasanatma nashokti na kankshati samasaveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. Quote, one who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. End quote. Bhagavad Gita 18:54. When one attains to the Brahman platform, he neither hankers nor laments. He actually partakes of transcendental, blissful enjoyment. Although King Prithu was an incarnation of Vishnu, he nonetheless taught the people in his kingdom to take instructions from a spiritual master who represents the disciplic succession. Thus one can become fortunate and enjoy a blissful life even within this material world. In this verse, the verb Vedanti is sometimes taken to mean, quote, understanding, end quote. Thus, when a person understands Brahman, or the supreme source of everything, he enjoys a blissful life. Text 26. In this way, when the chivalrous activities of King Prithu comes to be known to the people in general, King Prithu will always hear about himself and his activities. Purport. To artificially advertise oneself and thus enjoy a so-called reputation is a kind of conceit. Pṛthu Mahārāja was famous amongst the people because of his chivalrous activities. He did not have to advertise himself artificially. One's factual reputation cannot be covered. Text 27. No one will be able to disobey the orders of Pṛthu Mahārāja. After conquering the world, he will completely eradicate the threefold miseries of the citizens. Then he will be recognized all over the world. At that time, both the Suras and the Asuras will undoubtedly glorify his magnanimous activities. Purport. At the time of Mahārāja Pṛthu, the world was ruled by one emperor, although there were many subordinate states. Just as there are many United States in various parts of the world, in olden days the entire world was ruled through many states, but there was a supreme emperor who ruled over all subsidiary states. As soon as there were some discrepancies in the maintenance of the varnashram system, the emperor would immediately take charge of the small states. The word upatita loka shalya indicates that Mahārāja Pṛthu was completely uprooted the miseries of the citizens. The word shalya means, quote, piercing thorns, end quote. There are many kinds of miserable thorns that pierce the citizens of a state, but all competent rulers, even up to the reign of Mahārāja Yudhisthira, uprooted all the miserable conditions of the citizens. It is stated that during the reign of Mahārāja Yudhisthira, there did not even exist severe cold or scorching heat, nor did the citizens suffer from any kind of mental anxiety. This is the standard of good government. Such a peaceful and prosperous government, devoid of anxiety, was established by Pṛthu Mahārāja. Thus, the inhabitants of both saintly and demoniac planets were all engaged in glorifying the activities of Mahārāja Pṛthu. Persons or nations anxious to spread their influence all over the world should consider this point. If one is able to eradicate completely the threefold miseries of the citizens, he should aspire to rule the world. One should not aspire to rule for any political or diplomatic consideration. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 4th Canto, 16th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Praise of King Pṛthu by the Professional Reciters. The following is a free for download audiobook from the website krishnapath.org. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Part 2, Chapter 17. Mahārāja Pṛthu becomes angry at the earth. Text 1. The great sage Maitreya continued, in this way, the reciters who were glorifying Mahārāja Pṛthu readily described his qualities and chivalrous activities. At the end, Mahārāja Pṛthu offered them various presentations with all due respect and worshipped them adequately. Text 2. King Pṛthu thus satisfied and offered all respect to all the leaders of the Brahmanas and other castes, to his servants, to his ministers, to the priests, citizens, general countrymen, people from other communities, admirers as well as others, and thus they all became happy. Text 3. The Vidura inquired from the great sage Maitreya, my dear Brahmana, since Mother Earth can appear in different shapes, why did she take the shape of a cow? And when King Pṛthu milked her, who became the calf? And what was the milking pot? Text 4. The surface of the earth is by nature low in some places and high in others. How did King Pṛthu level the surface of the earth, and why did the king of heaven, Indra, steal the horse meant for the sacrifice? Text 5. The great saintly king, Mahārāja Pṛthu, received knowledge from Sanat Kumar, who was the greatest Vedic scholar. After receiving knowledge to be applied practically in his life, how did the saintly king attain his desired destination? Purport. There are 4 Vaishnava Sampradaya systems of disciplic succession. One Sampradaya comes from Brahmaloka, or Lord Brahma. and one from the goddess of fortune, one from the Kumars headed by Sanat Kumar, and one from Lord Shiva. These 4 systems of disciplic succession are still going on. As King Prithu has illustrated, one who is serious to receive transcendental knowledge must accept a guru or spiritual master in one of these 4 disciplic successions. It is said that unless one accepts a mantra from one of these sampradayas, the so-called mantra will not act in Kali Yuga. Many sampradayas have sprung up without authority, and they are misleading the people by giving unauthorized mantras. The rascals of these so-called sampradayas do not observe the Vedic rules and regulations. Although they are addicted to all kinds of sinful activities, they still offer the people mantras and thus mislead them. Intelligent persons, however, know that such mantras will never be successful, and as such they never patronize such upstart spiritual groups. People should be very careful about these nonsensical sampradayas. To get some facility for sense gratification, unfortunate people in this age receive mantras from these so-called sampradayas. Pṛthu Mahārāja, however, showed by his example that one should receive knowledge from a bona fide sampradaya. Therefore, Maharaj Prithu accepted Sanat Kumar as his spiritual master. Texts 6 and 7. Pṛthu Mahārāja was a powerful incarnation of Lord Krishna's potencies. Consequently, any narration concerning his activities is surely very pleasing to hear, and it produces all good fortune. As far as I am concerned, I am always your devotee as well as a devotee of the Lord, who is known as Adhokshaja. Please, therefore, narrate all the stories of King Prithu, who, in the form of the son of King Vena, milked the cow-shaped earth. Purport. Lord Krishna is also known as Avatari, which means one from whom all the incarnations emanate. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhava mata sarvam prabhatate. Quote, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. End quote. Bhagavad Gita 10:8. Thus, Lord Krishna is the origin of everyone's appearance. As far as this material world is concerned, Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva are all emanations from Krishna. These 3 incarnations of Krishna are called guna avatars. The material world is governed by 3 material modes of nature, and Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva respectively take charge of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Maharaj Prithu is also an incarnation of those qualities of Lord Krishna by which one rules over conditioned souls. In this verse, the word adhokshaja, meaning, quote, beyond the perception of the material senses, end quote, is very significant. No one can perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead by mental speculation. Therefore, a person with a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since one can only form an impersonal idea on the strength of one's material senses, the Lord is known as Adhokshaja. Text 8. Sutta Goswami continued, When Vidura became inspired to hear of the activities of Lord Krishna in his various incarnations, Maitreya, also being inspired and being very pleased with Vidura, began to praise him. Then Maitreya spoke as follows. Purport. Talk of Krishna Katha, or topics about Lord Krishna or his incarnations, is so spiritually inspiring that the reciter and hearer are never exhausted. That is the nature of spiritual talks. We have actually seen that one can never become satiated by hearing the conversations between Vidura and Maitreya. Both of them are devotees, and the more Vidura inquires, the more Maitreya is encouraged to speak. A symptom of spiritual talks is that no one feels tired. Upon hearing the questions of Vidura, the great sage Maitreya did not feel disgusted, but rather felt encouraged to speak at greater length. Text 9. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, at the time King Prithu was enthroned by the great sages and brahmanas and declared to be the protector of the citizens, there was a scarcity of food grains. The citizens actually became skinny due to starvation. Therefore they came before the king and informed him of their real situation. Purport. Information is given herein concerning the selection of the king by the brahmanas. According to the Varnashram system, the brahmanas are considered to be the heads of the society and therefore to be situated in the topmost social position. The Varnashram Dharma, the institution of 4 Varnas and 4 ashrams, is very scientifically designed. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Varnashram Dharma is not a man-made institution, but is God-made. In this narration, it's clearly indicated that the Brahmanas used to control the royal power. When an evil king like Vena ruled, the Brahmanas would kill him through their Brahminical powers and would select a proper ruler by testing his qualifications. In other words, the Brahmanas, the intelligent men or great sages, would control the monarchical powers. Here we have an indication of how the Brahmanas elected King Prithu to the throne as the protector of the citizens. The citizens, being skinny due to hunger, approached the king and informed him that necessary action should be taken. The structure of the Varnashram Dharma is so nice that the Brahmanas would guide the head of state. The head of state would then give protection to the citizens. The Kshatriyas would take charge of protecting the people in general, and under the protection of the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas would protect the cows, produce food grains, and distribute them. Shudras, the working class, would help the higher 3 classes by manual labor. This is the perfect social system. Text 10 and 11. Dear King, just as a tree with a fire burning in the hollow of the trunk gradually dries up, we are drying up due to the fire of hunger in our stomach. You are the protector of surrendered souls, and you have been appointed to give employment to us. Therefore we have all come to you for protection. You are not only a king, but the incarnation of God as well. Indeed, you are the king of all kings. You can give us all kinds of occupational engagements, for you are the master of our livelihood. Therefore, O king of all kings, please arrange to satisfy our hunger by the proper distribution of food grains. Please take care of us, lest we soon die for want of food. Purport. It is the duty of the king to see that everyone in the social orders, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, is fully employed in the state. Thus, just as it is the duty of the Brahmanas to elect a proper king, it is the duty of the king to see that all the Varnas, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, are fully engaged in their respective occupational duties. It is here indicated that although the people were allowed to perform their duties, they were still unemployed. Although they were not lazy, they still could not produce sufficient food to satisfy their hunger. When the people are perplexed in this way, they should approach the head of government, and the president or king should take immediate action to mitigate the distress of the people. Text 12. After hearing this lamentation and seeing the pitiable condition of the citizens, King Prithu contemplated this matter for a long time to see if he could find out the underlying causes. Text 13. Having arrived at a conclusion, the king took up his bow and arrow and aimed them at the earth, exactly as Lord Shiva destroyed the whole world out of anger. Purport. King Prithu found out the cause for the scarcity of food grains. He could understand that it was not the people's fault, for they were not lazy in executing their duties. Rather, the earth was not producing sufficient food grains. This indicates that the earth can produce sufficiently if everything is properly arranged, but sometimes the earth can refuse to produce food grains for various reasons. The theory that there is a scarcity of food grains due to an increase of population is not a very sound theory. There are other causes that enable the earth to produce profusely or to stop producing. King Prithu found out the proper causes and took the necessary steps immediately. Text 14. When the earth saw that King Prithu was taking his bow and arrow to kill her, she became very much afraid and began to tremble. Then she began to flee, exactly as a deer which runs very swiftly when followed by a hunter. Being afraid of King Prithu, she took the shape of a cow and began to run. Purport. Just as a mother produces various children, both male and female, the womb of Mother Earth produces all kinds of living entities in various shapes. Thus, it is possible for Mother Earth to take on innumerable shapes. At this time, in order to avoid the wrath of King Prithu, she took the shape of a cow. Since a cow is never to be killed, Mother Earth thought it wise to take the shape of a cow in order to avoid King Prithu's arrows. King Prithu, however, could understand this fact, and therefore he did not stop chasing the cow-shaped earth. Text 15. Seeing this, Maharaj Prithu became very angry, and his eyes became as red as the early morning sun. Placing an arrow on his bow, he chased the cow-shaped earth wherever she would run. Text 16. The cow-shaped earth ran here and there in outer space and between the heavenly planets and the earth, and wherever she ran, the king chased her with his bow and arrows. Text 17. Just as a man cannot escape the cruel hands of death, the cow-shaped earth could not escape the hands of the son of Vena. At length the earth, fearful, her heart aggrieved, turned back in helplessness. Text 18. Addressing the great opulent King Prithu as the knower of religious principles and shelter of the surrendered, she said, "Please save me. You are the protector of all living entities. Now you are situated as the king of this planet." Purport. The cow-shaped earth addressed King Prithu as Dharmaraj, or Dhammagya, which refers to one who knows the principles of religion. The principles of religion dictate that a woman, a cow, a child, a brahmana, and an old man must be given all protection by the king or anyone else. Consequently, Mother Earth took the shape of a cow. She was also a woman. Thus she appealed to the king as one who knows the principles of religion. Religious principles also dictate that one is not to be killed if he surrenders. She reminded King Prithu that not only was he an incarnation of God, but he was situated as the king of the earth as well. Therefore his duty was to excuse her. Text 19. The cow-shaped earth continued to appeal to the king. "I am very poor and have not committed any sinful activities. I do not know why you want to kill me. Since you are supposed to be the knower of all religious principles, why are you so envious of me, and why are you so anxious to kill a woman?" Purport. The earth appealed to the king in two ways. A king who knows religious principles cannot kill anyone who has not committed sinful activities. Apart from this, a woman is not to be killed even if she does commit some sinful activities. Since the earth was innocent and was also a woman, the king should not kill her. Text 20. Even if a woman does commit some sinful activity, no one should place his hand upon her. And what to speak of you, dear king, who are so merciful? You are a protector and you are affectionate to the poor. Text 21. The cow-shaped earth continued, "My dear king, I'm just like a strong boat, and all the paraphernalia of the world is standing upon me. If you break me to pieces, how can you protect yourself and your subjects from drowning?" Purport. Beneath the entire planetary system is the Garbha water. Lord Vishnu lies on this Garbha water, and from his abdomen a lotus stem grows, and all the planets within the universe are floating in the air, being supported by this lotus stem. If a planet is destroyed, it must fall into the water of Garbha. The earth therefore warned King Prithu that he would gain nothing by destroying her. Indeed, how would he protect himself and his citizens from drowning in the Garbha water? In other words, outer space may be compared to an ocean of air, and each and every planet floating on it, just as a boat or an island floats on the ocean. Sometimes planets are called dvipa, or islands, and sometimes they're called boats. Thus, the cosmic manifestation is partially explained in this reference by the cow-shaped earth. Text 22. King Prithu replied to the earthly planet, "My dear earth, you have disobeyed my orders and rulings. In the form of a demigod, you accepted your share of the jagas we performed, but in return you have not produced sufficient food grains. For this reason, I must kill you." Purport. The cow-shaped earthly planet submitted that she was not only a woman, but she was innocent and sinless as well. Thus, she argued that she should not be killed. Besides, she pointed out that being perfectly religious-minded, the king should not violate the religious principles that forbade killing a woman. In reply, Maharaj Prithu informed her that, first of all, she had disobeyed his order. This was her first sinful activity. Secondly, he accused her of taking her share of the jaga sacrifices, but not producing sufficient food grains in return. Text 23. Although you are eating green grass every day, you are not filling your milk bag so that we can utilize your milk. Since you are willfully committing offenses, it cannot be said that you are not punishable due to your assuming the form of a cow. Purport. A cow eats green grasses in the pasture and fills her milk bag with sufficient milk so that the cow herdsman can milk her. Sacrifices, yagas, are performed to produce sufficient clouds that will pour water over the earth. The word paya can refer to both to milk and to water. As one of the demigods, the earthly planet was taking her share of the yagas. That is, she was eating green grass, but in return she was not producing sufficient food grains. That is, she was not filling her milk bag. Maharaja Prithu was therefore justified in threatening to punish her for her offense. Text 24. You have so lost your intelligence that despite my orders you do not deliver the seeds of herbs and grains formerly created by Brahma, now hidden within yourself. Purport. While creating all the planets in the universe, Lord Brahma also created the seeds of various grains, herbs, plants, and trees. When sufficient water falls from the clouds, the seeds fructify and produce fruits, grains, vegetables, etc. By his example, Maharaja Prithu indicates that whenever there is a scarcity of food in food production, the head of the government should take steps to see why production is being held up and what should be done to rectify the situation. Text 25. Now, with the help of my arrows, I shall cut you to pieces, and with your flesh satisfy the hunger-stricken citizens who are now crying for want of grains. Thus I shall satisfy the crying citizens of my kingdom. Purport. Here we find some indication how the government can arrange for the eating of cow flesh. It is here indicated that in a rare circumstance, when there is no supply of grains, the government may sanction the eating of meat. However, when there is sufficient food, the government should not allow the eating of cow's flesh just to satisfy the fastidious tongue. In other words, in rare circumstances, when people are suffering for want of grains, meat eating or flesh eating can be allowed, but not otherwise. The maintenance of slaughterhouses for the satisfaction of the tongue and the killing of animals unnecessarily should never be sanctioned by a government. As described in the previous verse, animals or cows should be given sufficient grass to eat. If, despite a sufficient supply of grass, a cow does not supply milk, and there is an acute shortage of food, the dried-up cow may be utilized to feed the hungry masses of people. According to the law of necessity, first of all, human society must try to produce food grains and vegetables, but if they fail in this, they can indulge in flesh eating, and otherwise not. As human society is presently structured, there is sufficient production of fruit of grains all over the world. Therefore, the opening of slaughterhouses cannot be supported. In some nations, there is so much surplus grain that sometimes extra grain is thrown into the sea, and sometimes the government forbids further production of grain. The conclusion is that the earth produces sufficient grain to feed the entire population, but the distribution of this grain is restricted due to trade regulations and a desire for profit. Consequently, in some places there is scarcity of grain, and in others profuse production. If there were one government on the surface of the earth to handle the distribution of grain, there would be no question of scarcity, no necessity to open slaughterhouses, and no need to present false theories about overpopulation. Text 26. Any cruel person, be he a man, woman, or impotent eunuch, who is only interested in his personal maintenance and has no compassion for other living entities, may be killed by the king. Such killing can never be considered actual killing. Purport. The planet Earth is actually a woman in her constitutional form, and as such she needs to be protected by the king. Maharaja Prithu argues, however, that if a citizen within the state, be he man, woman, or a eunuch, is not compassionate upon his fellow men, he or she may be killed by the king, and such killing is never to be considered actual killing. As far as the field of spiritual activities is concerned, when a devotee is self-satisfied and does not preach the glories of Krishna, he is not considered a first-class devotee. A devotee who tries to preach, who has compassion upon innocent persons who have no knowledge of Krishna, is a superior devotee. In his prayer to the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj said that he was not personally interested in liberation from this material world. Rather, he did not wish to be liberated from this material condition until all fallen souls are delivered. Even in the material field, if a person is not interested in others' welfare, he should be considered to be condemned by the personality of Godhead or his incarnation as Pṛthu Mahārāja. Text 27. You are very much puffed up with pride and have become almost insane. Presently you have assumed the form of a cow by your mystic powers. Nonetheless, I shall cut you into small pieces like grain, and I will uphold the entire population by my personal mystic powers. Purport. The earth informed King Pṛthu that if he destroyed her, he and his subjects would all fall down into the waters of the Garbhad ocean. King Pṛthu now replies to that point. Although the earth assumed the shape of a cow by her mystic powers in order to be saved from being killed by the king was nevertheless aware of this fact and would not hesitate to cut her to pieces, just like small bits of grain. As far as the destruction of the citizens is concerned, Mahārāja Pṛthu maintained that he could uphold everyone by his own mystic powers. He did not need the help of the earthly planet. Being an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, Pṛthu Mahārāja possessed the power of Shankarshan, which is explained by the scientists as the power of gravitation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is holding millions of planets in space without any support. Similarly, Pṛthu Mahārāja would not have any difficulty supporting all his citizens and himself in space without the help of the planet Earth. The Lord is known as Yogeshwar, master of all mystic power. Consequently, the Earth planet was informed by the king that she need not worry about his standing without her help. Text 28. At this time, Mahārāja Pṛthu became exactly like Yamaraj, and his whole body appeared very angry. In other words, he was anger personified. After hearing him, the planet Earth began to tremble. She surrendered, and with folded hands began to speak as follows. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is death personified to miscreants and the Supreme Beloved Lord to the devotees. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Mrityu sarvaharashchaham, quote, I am all-devouring death, end quote, Bhagavad Gita 10:34. Faithless unbelievers who challenge the appearance of God will be delivered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead when he appears before them as death. Hiranyakashipu, for example, challenged the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Lord met him in the form of Nrsimhadev and killed him. Similarly, the planet Earth saw Mahārāja Pṛthu as death personified, and she also saw him in the mood of anger personified. Therefore, she began to tremble. One cannot challenge the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in any circumstance. It is better to surrender unto him and to take his protection at all times. Text 29. The planet Earth spoke, My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are transcendental in your position, and by your material energy you have expanded yourself in various forms and species of life through the interaction of the three modes of material nature. Unlike some other masters, you always remain in your transcendental position and are not affected by this material creation, which is subject to different material interactions. Consequently, you are not bewildered by material activities. Purport. After King Pṛthu gave his royal command, the planet Earth in the shape of a cow could understand that the king was a directly empowered incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the king knew everything, past, present, and future. Thus there was no possibility of the Earth's cheating him. The Earth was accused of hiding the seeds of all herbs and grains, and therefore she is preparing to explain how those seeds of these herbs and grains can again be exposed. The Earth knew that the king was very angry with her, and she realized that unless she pacified his anger, there was no possibility of placing a positive program before him. Therefore, in the beginning of her speech, she very humbly presents herself as a part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's body. She submits that the various bodily forms manifest in the physical world are but parts and parcels of the supreme gigantic body. It is said that the lower planetary systems are parts and parcels of the legs of the Lord, whereas upper planetary systems are parts and parcels of the Lord's head. The Lord creates this material world by his external energy, but this external energy is in one sense not different from him. Yet, at the same time, the Lord is not directly manifest in his external energy, but is always situated in the spiritual energy. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:10, Maya Dakshina Prakriti, Material nature is working under the direction of the Lord. Therefore, the Lord is not attached to the external energy, and he is addressed in this verse as Guna Atma, the source of the three modes of material nature. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Savendriya Guna Bhasham, Sarvendriya Vivarjitam, Asaktam Sarvabrichaiva, Nirgunam Guna Bhoktircha. Quote, the super soul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all modes of material nature. End quote. Bhagavad Gita 13:15. Although the Lord is not attached to the external energy, he is nonetheless the master of it. The philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, upholding that the Lord is simultaneously one with and different from his creation, Achintya Beta Beta Tattva, is very easily understandable in this connection. The planet Earth explains that although the Lord is attached to the external energy, he is nonetheless nirduta. He is completely free from the activities of the external energy. The Lord is always situated in his internal energy. Therefore, in this verse, it is stated, Svarupanu Bhavena. The Lord remains completely in his internal potency and yet has full knowledge of the external energy as well as the internal energy, just as his devotee remains always in a transcendental position, keeping himself in the service of the Lord without becoming attached to the material body. Srila Rupa Goswami says that the devotee who is always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord is always liberated, regardless of his material situation. If it is possible for a devotee to remain transcendental, it is certainly possible for the Supreme Personality of Godhead to remain in his internal potency without being attached to the external potency. There should be no difficulty in understanding this situation. Just as a devotee is never bewildered by his material body, the Lord is never bewildered by the external energy of this material world. The devotee is not hampered by the material body, although he is situated in a physical body that runs according to so many material conditions. Just as there are 5 kinds of air functioning within the body and so many organs, the hands, legs, the tongue, genitals, rectum, etc., all working differently. The spirit soul, the living entity who is in full knowledge of his position, is always engaged in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and is not concerned with the bodily functions. Although the Lord is connected with the material world, he is always situated in his spiritual energy and is always unattached to the functions of the material world. As far as the material body is concerned, there are 6, quote, waves, unquote, or symptomatic material conditions: hunger, thirst, lamentation, bewilderment, old age, and death. The liberated soul is never concerned by these 6 physical interactions. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being the all-powerful master of all energies, has some connection with the external energy, but he is always free from the interactions of the external energy in the material world. Text 30. The planet Earth continued, My dear Lord, you are the complete conductor of the material creation. You have created this cosmic manifestation and the 3 material qualities, and therefore you have created me, the planet Earth, the resting place of all living entities. Yet you are always fully independent, my Lord. Now that you are present before me and ready to kill me with your weapons, let me know where I should go to take shelter, and tell me who can give me protection. Purport. The planet Earth herein exhibits the symptoms of full surrender before the Lord. As stated, no one can protect the person from whom Krishna is prepared to kill, and no one can kill the person whom Krishna protects. Because the Lord was prepared to kill the planet Earth, there was no one to give protection to her. We are all receiving protection from the Lord, and therefore it is proper that every one of us surrender unto him. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructs, Sarvadharman Prichaja Mamekam Sharanam Bhaja Amtap Sarva Bhapibhyo Moksha Shami Mashucha. Quote, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. End quote. Bhagavad Gita 1866. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, quote, My dear Lord, whatever I have, even my mind, the center of all material necessities, namely my home, my body, and whatever I have in connection with this body, I now surrender unto you. You are now completely independent to act however you like. If you like, you can kill me, and if you like, you can save me. In any case, I'm your eternal servant, and you have every right to do whatever you like." End quote. Text 31. In the beginning of creation, you created all these moving and non-moving living entities by your inconceivable energy. Through this very same energy, you are now prepared to protect the living entities. Indeed, you are the supreme protector of religious principles. Why are you so anxious to kill me, even though I am in the form of a cow? Purport. The planet Earth argues that there is no doubt that one who creates can also annihilate by his sweet will. The planet Earth questions why she should be killed when the Lord is prepared to give protection to everyone. After all, it is the earth that is the resting place for all other living entities, and it is the earth that produces grains for them. Text 32. My dear Lord, although you are one, by your inconceivable potencies you have expanded yourself into many forms. Through the agency of Brahma, you have created this universe. Therefore, you are directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are not sufficiently experienced cannot understand your transcendental activities because they are covered by your illusory energy. Purport. God is one, but he expands himself in a variety of energies: material energy, spiritual energy, marginal energy, and so forth. Unless one is favored and specially endowed with grace, he cannot understand how one Supreme Personality of Godhead acts through his different energies. The living entities are also the marginal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahma is also one of these living entities, but he is especially empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although Brahma is supposed to be the creator of this universe, actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate creator. In this verse, the word Maya is significant. Maya means energy. Lord Brahma is not the energetic, but is one of the manifestations of the Lord's material energy or marginal energy. In other words, Lord Brahma is only an instrument. Although sometimes plans appear contradictory, there is definitely plan behind all action. One who is experienced and is favored by the Lord can understand that everything is being done according to the Lord's supreme plan. Text 33. My dear Lord, by your own potencies, you are the original cause of material elements, as well as the performing instruments, the senses, and the workers of the senses, the controlling demigods, the intelligence, and the ego, as well as everything else. By your energy, you manifest this entire cosmic manifestation, maintain it, and dissolve it. Through your energy alone, everything is sometimes manifest and sometimes not manifest. You are therefore the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. All activities begin with the creation of the total energy, the Mahatattva. Then, by the agitation of the three gunas, the physical elements are created, as well as the mind, ego, and the controllers of the senses. All of these are created one after another by the inconceivable energy of the Lord. In modern electronics, a mechanic may, by pushing only one button, set off an electronic chain reaction by which so many actions are carried out one after another. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead pushes the button of creation, and different energies create the material elements and various controllers of the physical elements, and their subsequent interactions follow the inconceivable plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 34. My dear Lord, you are always unborn. Once in the form of the original boar, you rescued me from the waters in the bottom of the universe. Through your own energy, you created all the physical elements, the senses, and the heart for the maintenance of the world. Purport. This refers to the time when Lord Krishna appeared as the supreme boar, Varaha, and rescued the earth, which had been merged in water. The Asura Hiranyaksha had dislocated the earth from its orbit and thrown it beneath the waters of the Garbhodaka Ocean. The Lord, in the shape of the original boar, rescued the earth. Text 35. My dear Lord, in this way, You once protected me by rescuing me from the water, and consequently your name has been famous as Dharadhar, one who holds the planet Earth. Yet, at the present moment, in the form of a great hero, you are about to kill me with sharpened arrows. I am, however, just like a boat on the water, keeping everything afloat. Purport. The Lord is known as Dharadhar, meaning, quote, he who keeps the planet Earth on his tusks, as the boar incarnation, end quote. Thus, the planet Earth in the shape of a cow is accounting the contradictory acts of the Lord. Although he once saved the Earth, he now wants to upset the Earth, which is just like a boat on the water. No one can understand the activities of the Lord. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, human beings sometimes think the Lord's activities contradictory. Text 36. My dear Lord, I am also the creation of one of your energies, composed of the three modes of material nature. Consequently, I am bewildered by your activities. Even the activities of your devotees cannot be understood, and what to speak of your pastimes. Thus, everything appears to us to be contradictory and wonderful. Purport. Activities of the Supreme Personality of God in various forms and incarnations are always uncommon and wonderful. It is not possible for a tiny human being to estimate the purpose and plans of such activities. Therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami has said that unless the Lord's activities are accepted as inconceivable, they cannot be explained. The Lord is eternally existing as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in Golok Vrindavan. He has also simultaneously expanded himself in innumerable forms, beginning with Lord Ram, Lord Nrsimha, Lord Varaha, and all the incarnations coming directly from Shankarshan. Shankarshan is the expansion of Baladev, and Baladev is the first manifestation of Krishna. Therefore, all these incarnations are known as Kala. The word Ishvaranam refers to all the personalities of Godhead, as stated in Brahma Samhita 539. Ramadi Murtishu Kala Niyamena Tishtan. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is confirmed that all the incarnations are partial expansions, or Kala, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should not take the plural number of the words Ishvaranam to mean that there are many Godheads. The fact that God is one, but he exists eternally and expands himself in innumerable forms and acts in various ways. Sometimes the common man is bewildered by all this and considers such activities contradictory, but they are not contradictory. There is a great plan behind all of the Lord's activities. For our understanding, it is sometimes said that the Lord is situated in the heart of the thief as well as in the heart of the householder, but the supersoul in the heart of the thief dictates, quote, go and steal things from that particular house, end quote. And at the same time, the Lord tells the householder, quote, now be careful of thieves and burglars, end quote. These instructions to different persons appear contradictory, yet we should know that the supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has some plan, and we should not consider such activities contradictory. The best course is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead wholeheartedly, and being protected by him, remain peaceful. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 4th Canto, 17th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Maharaj Prithu Becomes Angry at the Earth.